Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Dragonstone before her for the first real time reared a rare smile out of Daenerys as she stood at the bow of her massive ship. Seeing it poke through the horizon, her palms tightened over the railing, itching to actually set foot on the land. When her boot finally sank into the sand, her heart began to pound. As the waves crashed against the shore, she stepped on. The wind blew her hair and the dark garment she wore. Her camp slowed their pace as she moved, though she suddenly stopped, crouching down to lay her hand on the sand, rubbing her hand over the damp bank, taking pebbles into her fist, rolling them in between her fingers. She stood then, but kept her hand closed around the sand. After walking a ways, they came to a giant gate on the sand. Large faces of dragons sculpted into it. Daenerys stopped before the gate as her unsullied passed by to open it. It took 5 men to push the doors wide. A few moments later, her ancestral home bursted through the skyline. Feeling a small smirk bounce across her countenance, Daenerys stepped on. Next, she began the long climb upwards the stone stairs to the castle. Her pack still lingered behind her, watching as she went. The dark drabness commanded the dreary stone walls as Daenerys strolled through the keep. Unexpectedly, inside they find an air of life, with accompanied lit torches along the walls. Daenerys' blood riders stuck to her side. Tyrion quickened his pace to catch up to Daemon. "My queen," he began, huffing quietly. "There might be some Baratheon bannermen still hiding here." "I've suspected as much," Daemon replied, dryly. "They must have gotten stranded here," Ser Barristan suggested. "Or perhaps they've just set a trap," Daario called out, hand tightening on his dagger. "The Baratheon king knew we'd come here, and there's 20 men hiding somewhere with crossbows." Dany didn't respond to either of them, just turning her head to gaze upon another mural of a dragon on a nearby wall. This one depicting a large black dragon with a white-haired rider on the back of it. She liked that one. After essentially tiptoeing through the already quiet halls, the group reached the floor-to-ceiling doors leading into the Great Hall. Daenerys stopped as the Unsullied moved forward to attempt to get it open for her. Yet this time, the doors didn't move all the way open, barred from the inside, but just enough to alert the people on the other side. Immediately, they felt the presence of movement through the door, shuffling and the clanging of swords together, chainmail glenging in response. Ser Barristan stepped in front of Daenerys, sword drawn. All went silent. No more noise from the other room, until Dany moved out from behind Barristan, heading nearer to the door. The Lord Hand reached out. "My queen, what are you doing?" Dany didn't turn to him, just held her hand up in response. She pressed her palm against the door, then her ear. Then she knew that there was, in fact, a number of people just mere feet from her. "You're scared," she said. "I understand. You're not supposed to be here. But what happens now is your hands let me in, and bend the knee, or face the wrath of my dragons. Because do not be dismayed, this is my home, and you are trespassing." Glancing to Barristan, Tyrion shifted somewhat uncomfortably. No voices came from the opposite side of the door, only moments later hearing the movement of the large object that blocked the door. Screeching against the stone floor, it sounded like a boulder rolling. Once the noise stopped, Daenerys uttered quietly, "Throw your swords aside and move away from the door." After the sound of their swords hitting the floor, Dany moved aside for her Unsullied to step forward and open the door. A few moments later, revealing 6 Baratheon bannermen shaking in their armor. Mostly boys, not much older than 17 name days. The oldest among them stepped forward. This one did look to be reaching half-life. His grizzled face scowled, and in his hand he still gripped a small blade. Daenerys looked the man in the face and shook her head. The man's scowl worsened, gritting of teeth, face reddening. The queen was unburdened. Much to her camp's immediate dismay, she stepped forward toward the last armed Baratheon. The Lord Hand surged forward, but Daenerys again held her hand out to halt him. For some reason, despite the danger, Barristan the Bold stopped. The bannerman's eyes widened as Daenerys neared, though he didn't move. Even as the enemy queen arrived mere feet from him, the dragon queen right in front of him. He should stab her right on the spot, but is petrified by her piercing stare, her purple eyes paralyzing. Her feet carried her inches away. the blade even closer to her in his hands. She kept her eyes on him, still as a tree, and him trembling like a leaf in the wind. Not spending on another second on the weaker man, she moved past him. The other bannermen evaded her path at all costs. As she went, the older Baratheon loosened, falling to his knees, the blade falling from his hand. Baratheon and the Unsullied flooded the room, taking prisoners. Her ancestral throne before her, that truly meant more. She approached the seat, carved into the rock, uncaring of anything else in the moment. A small smirk appeared again. She took the seat that was always supposed to be hers. Guards throwing open the doors, Jon and Sansa stepped inside to find two figures hunched over a map table. At once they bowed. "Your Grace," the Warden of the North said graciously. "Lord Hans Davos, to what do we owe the honor of your summons?" The hand chuckled at the formality while Stannis reacted not. "Come here, Stark. Lady Stark. Lady Stark." Both complied, each taking positions across the table from the king in hand. "I received a raven from Dragonstone. Apparently the skeleton garrison I left there surrendered without a fight to the dragon bitch." Jon shared a glance with Sansa, one quite worried. "I won't begrudge them. Against 3 dragons and unsullied legions, they didn't stand a chance." "Dragonstone means nothing to me," Stannis waved it off dismissively. "The problem is that now we have her to deal with, her and her armies. I'm sure this would be better served with others rather than myself," Sansa began, only for the king to cut her off. She nodded. "What would you have of me, your grace?" It was Davos who answered. "Daenerys Targaryen has allies in Westeros, namely House Tyrell and House Martell, allies with large armies that dwarf our own. You were in King's Landing last and dealt with both Olenna Tyrell and Ilaria Sand. I only knew the latter in passing, Sir Davos. Still, out of all I can trust, you're it," Stannis answered, glaring at the map. "We have a narrow window until Daenerys lands enough of her foreign army to threaten us. So far, she hasn't yet, and yet I'm still fucked since the Tyros and Dornish are massing." The operations officers had calibrated the figurines atop the map with precision based on the latest intelligence. As one of Stannis' veteran commanders, Jon could tell the exact size of each of the armies. They outnumbered the Tyrells, but not them, the Martells, and Cersei combined, let alone the wild card that was Daenerys Targaryen. "You need to attack now. Hit while you still have the opportunity." Jon stabbed at the map. "Annihilate the forces opposed to you one by one." "There poses a problem," Davos countered, Stannis silent. "If we march against Cersei, she can bog us down in a siege or savage us in city fighting like the last time. If we target the Tyrells, we risk Cersei assaulting us from the rear in a desperate breakout attempt. She has the city walls. It gives her a flexibility we don't have. And that's not mentioning the Dornish." "Dorne is in no hurry," Sansa claimed. "That was one thing I remember about Oberyn. They don't care about the 7 kingdoms." Jon peered at her. "They allied with Daenerys Targaryen." She smiled. Jon was too honorable sometimes. Just because he would carry out his oaths to the death didn't mean others would. "They has the same alliance during Robert's rebellion, and delayed all the same. I expect them to support the Dragon Queen, but not rush." Her brother was once again impressed with her level of knowledge, far from the naive romantic girl of before. "So that still leaves the threat of Cersei. See, Davos," the king said suddenly, stilling conversation. "Has the Queen of Thorns mobilized all her banners?" Davos shook his head. "No, your grace. Several houses have sought neutrality." "Why?" A small smirk poked through his dour visage. "We will divide our forces." He leaned forward, repositioning the figurines to suit his stroke of genius. "Lord Stark will lead his northerners, wildlings, and the Tully army and take Hayford Castle in the Crownlands. Box Cersei into King's Landing. Meanwhile, I march the rest of our forces to Highgarden." Jon caught on quickly. "You'd have a mostly mounted command, which can cover more ground, hitting the Tyrells quickly before the Dornish could arrive, and annihilating a third of your opposing force. Aggressive, almost insanely so, but the divide between madness and greatness was often a fine line. Executed well, the plan could be a war-winning move. And Cersei? We take Highgarden, then quick march to King's Landing and find a way to defeat Cersei's forces in the field. A victory in the south would rally the Stormlands truly behind me once more, and we'd have an army fresh and motivated to crush that incestuous whore and get me the Iron Throne before the other whore lands." Stannis' blue eyes burned with triumph and ambition. He could taste his victory. Sansa, leaning closer to Jon, glanced at the peninsula of Dorne. Defeating the Tyrells and securing King's Landing could convince the Dornish to back off, especially if you offer them Cersei, the Mountain, and the Kingslayer as a gift. Compensation for the loss of Oberyn and Elia Martell. There exists only one problem. All eyes shifted back to Jon. If you divide your forces, then Olenna's army is only slightly inferior to yours, my king. We cannot afford significant losses. The burning triumph only roared higher. Stannis' grin taking on an eerie quality. Lord Stark, allow me to take care of that. Unsullied guard yanking open the door, the occupants of the Dragonstone war room all bowed at once as Queen Daenerys Targaryen entered, black dress brushing along the stone floor, hands clasped together and silver chain across her shoulder and chest, held in place by a three-headed dragon clasp. While not the leather battle dress she had taken to wear, it painted a picture of a fierce warrior queen, Visenya Reborn, if without the sword. Behind her trailed Missandei herself in all black. Grey Worm brought up the rear as they made their way towards the head of the room, Dasturke. Blood Riders fanning inside and taking positions along the walls, hands clasped to their air cakes. No one in the Queen's orbit was taking any chances anymore, and none of the small council begrudged her for the precaution. Reaching the head of the table, Daenerys ran her hands along the gleaming ironwood, the cold stone, the bumps and ridges depicting the mountains and valleys of her homeland, where she had been born, only to be ripped away as a mere babe, condemned to exile. Now, with her dragons and her armies behind her, Daenerys had returned. House Targaryen had returned. It filled her with a burning resolve. Wordlessly, she scanned the various members of her council. Yara Greyjoy and her quiet brother Ellaria Sand and her daughters, Olenna Tyrell leaning on her walking stick, Tyrion Lannister barely able to reach the table, Lord Varys Darionarius, Grey Worm, Missandei, and finally Sar Barristan. Salmi, hand of the Queen and her sworn sword, much like Sar Criston Cole had been for Aegon II, although her situation seemed more like Ranriez, a motley sort drawn out of the hodgepodge of alliances that brought her back to the place of her birth. The sort that would deliver her victory. All right, her purple eyes gleamed with the triumph soon to be hers. Shall we begin? The conflict immediately grew heated. Few phrases spoken before it descended into a melee of words. You have to attack King's Landing now, Yara Greyjoy stated, vociferously splaying her hands on the table. Cersei is weak. Hit her before my brother arrives with his fleets, and you'll be sitting atop the Iron Throne in a week. If you mean for her to use her dragons, Tyrion responded with a scowl, then thousands of innocents will die in the firestorms. I doubt you care, Imperial Yaryar shot back with a scoff. I think what you're worried about, your cunt siblings. Tyrion bristled, but did not take the bait. If Cersei were smart, and she is, already she is making sure there are plenty of small folk in the grounds of the Red Keep. Any attack will only cause massive loss of life. It's called war. Ellaria Sand sat in her chair, swilling a glass of wine and sounding bored with the whole thing. If you don't have the stomach for it, then crawl back to your sister's skirts and let the true highborn sort it out. Narrowing his eyes, the imp blazed a fury at Ellaria. We know how you wage war. We do not poison little girls here. Marcella was innocent. She was a Lannister. The Regent of Dorne looked incredulous. As it seems, most Lannisters are her Grace's enemies, as they are ours. She huffed. Perhaps the sellsword is right about you. Enough. A single word from the Dragon Queen stilled the argument. Lord Tyrion is a member of this council, and you will treat him with respect. Curling her lips distastefully, Ellaria nevertheless obeyed. We all have different motivations, different goals. But uniting us is both a desire for revenge and a desire to see a better world. I am not here to become Queen of the Ashes. I believe that is wise, Your Grace. Eyes turned to Varys. It seems that the usurper Cersei has established a new series of defenses meant to fight your dragons. The Queen's brow rose, a flash of concern in her eyes for but a moment. The songs are vague, but these sound like the same device that took down Meraxes during the First Dornish War. With the Queen's dragons being their biggest asset, even the hint of them falling chastised the attack King's Landing at any cost proponents. Daenerys turned to Stannis Baratheon. You've been quiet, Lord Hand. Anything to add? Lips pursed in a tight line, Barristan gestured his finger away from the capital and towards Harrenhal. Everyone is fixated on the Iron Throne, but that is not the main threat. Cersei is weak and without many allies. The problem is Stannis Baratheon. Such had been on the minds of all involved, a sort of honest shock. Once a defeated joke that barely had any forces upon this very island, they had landed to find him in control of 3 kingdoms, allied with a 4th, and with a host of wildlings under his command, a proper force to be reckoned with. I agree with Sir Barristan. Stannis is the greater threat, Olenna Tyrell chimed in, fanning herself. His army is vast and undefeated, far larger if the negotiations with Pater Baelish and the Vale prove useful. Send me your forces to Harrenhal immediately, Your Grace, Daario said. With your dragons, we will turn his entire camp into the second field of fire. Daenerys seemed to consider his boasting, fitting in with the Targaryen fire and blood. Several worried glances made their way across the table. I would advise against it, Your Grace. The Queen's eyes found Theon Greyjoy. Speak, Lord Theon. Stannis' master of war is Jon Stark, Lord of Winterfell. Jon Snow! Tyrion exclaimed, shocked. Theon nodded. A man I grew up with when I was a ward of Eddard Stark, almost like a brother. He is a fundamentally honest man, and I think he could broker an arrangement between yourself and Stannis. Olenna snorted. Stannis cannot be reasoned with. He killed his own brother with blood magic rather than allow any compromise without himself as king. Peering curiously, Daenerys wondered why Theon would speak up for someone sworn to her enemies. Her eyes fell on her master of whisperers. Lord Varys, please tell me what your little birds say of this Jon Stark. Closing his eyes for a moment, Varys kept his hands clasped under the folds of his Aegsy-style robes. My birds sing many different songs, Your Grace. He was a bastard son of Ned Stark serving at the Wall, only to be legitimized by Stannis Baratheon and absolved of his vows. The Northerners call him the White Wolf. White Wolf? Daenerys suddenly remembered the White Wolf in her dreams. Wounded, alone, struggling, and howling for help. The dream had plagued her all through the voyage to Westeros. Could they refer to this Jon Stark? Why is that? He had a white direwolf by his side when he journeyed to Castle Black. Tyrion stated, perhaps that's it. Varys sighed. There's more to it than that. Every victory Stannis has had since finds Jon Stark in a starring role, earning him the title of the usurper's master of war. He is also called the Wrath of the North for the systematic killing of all of the enemies of House Stark. Which include House Targaryen, commented Ellaria. Your father killed his grandfather and uncle. Unlike what the Ironborn says, he won't be disposed to even treat with you. How vital is he to Stannis' cause? Asked Missandei. The spider smiled softly. The wildlings see him as close to a saint. The Northerners adore him. He is respected among the Rivermen and Stormlanders. I dare say he is the most popular and skilled man in the entire army, more so than Stannis himself. They say he's quite a force to be reckoned with. Taking down scores of men in battle, he's said to be a master swordsman. Drawing his dagger, naked horse spread-eagled on the hilt. Daario pointed at Harrenhal. Let me take my best men there. I'll slit his throat and end him once and for all. Doing so would destroy any chance at ruling the North, Your Grace, Tyrion rebutted. Any defeat of Cersei or Stannis must be done on the battlefield. Yaxon leaned forward. Send me to confer with Lord Stark. Perhaps. Daenerys held up a hand. I appreciate your efforts, Lord Greyjoy, but I only intend to confer with the usurper's master of war after he bends the knee before me. Theon drew back, quiet once more. The floor was completely yielded to him, discussing a plan to ferry the Dornish to outside the capital, where they would join with the armies of the Reach to both besiege it and wait for Stannis. An unsullied force would move to assault Casterly Rock with the Second Sons, while the Dothraki would land at Cracklaw Point and wait for Stannis to arrive, trapping him in a double hammer and anvil. To say Daario, Yara, Ellaria, and Olenna were skeptical was an understatement. That would take months just to set up, Daario exclaimed. Didn't you say your uncle was sailing the high seas, looking for allies? Yara nodded. We have to strike. Strike hard. That exposes us to Cersei's forces in the city, defended Tyrion. A cornered line will lash out viciously, so we must proceed with caution. Jon Stark crippled her army, ripping away all Riverland support it had. She'll stay bottled up, Olenna said bluntly. That bitch was obsessed with the Iron Throne. It'll weld her in place, hoping that you and Stannis destroy each other. That's why you have to annihilate Stannis and absorb his army. Hoist her by her own petard. Her fading green eyes were still sharp and piercing. You're a dragon. Be a dragon. Conversing with her daughters, Illyria gestures to the map. Sand snakes shifting several markers that represented various Dornish houses towards Starfall. Recent news from home. Edric Dane, intended to my niece, the Princess Arianne, has assembled our army at his keep. Subjecting us to march back to Sunspear to be ferried to Blackwater Rush would be inefficient. Tyrion stroked his beard. That allows more of the fleet to the ferrying of the Unsullied to Casterly Rock. I do not intend to sail halfway around Westeros and back again, Dario hissed. I may be the son of a pillow slave, but, from what I can tell, the Westerlands are as bare as a 60-year-old whore. Easy to fuck, but why the fuck would you want to? He smirked at Daenerys, who simply looked back to the table. The sellsword found more fertile ground among the sand snakes. Let it rot. Taking the moment to interject, Sir Barristan leaned in to whisper in Daenerys' ear. Tyrion's plan should be followed as to the Reach and Dorne. Let them form a pincer to attack Stannis. Nodding, Daenerys looked at Olenna. Stannis' army numbers about 40,000. That is less than the army massed at Highgarden, I believe. Grimacing, the Queen of Thorns nodded. By about 15,000 according to my spies. My grandson Garland informs me that Lord Tarly is delaying while Lord Hightower won't move until the High Septon says the gods favor it. Dario laughed, while others sighed. The Dornish army should allow us to dwarf his host, though, that and Randyll Tarly's arrival. He could attempt to destroy you. That would open him up to an attack from my sister, Tyrion noted. He'll need to leave a screening force, which would negate his numerical advantage. Stannis will go for Cersei. Olenna seemed confident of her prediction. One of his biggest mistakes was not going after Tywin in the Riverlands rather than attack King's Landing. However, he and Jon Stark crippled the Lannisters at North Hill. The Kingslayer's force is a shadow of its former self, while Stannis has nearly 40,000 under his command. He's in a position to take the capital, and he'll do so with all his forces, then turn on us. It would be mad to divide his army at this point, Your Grace, Barristan spoke, as it would for yours. Nodding, Daenerys stared at the painted table, watching, studying the various figurines on the table vast distances between them. She knew not of complex tactics or grand strategy, but the machinations of men and the folly of certainty in conflict were known to her, hammered into her by countless years of hardship and suffering. And yet through it all, she had faith in her instincts, faith in herself. In the end, there was really no choice. Grey Worm, Naris, begin preparations to land at Crackclaw Point. The Unsullied commander nodded, while Dario grinned like a hyena. You said, Lady Tyrell, for me to be a dragon. Daris smiled, violet eyes blazing fire and blood. I think that is the best advice I have gotten since arriving here. I trust you enjoyed the demonstration, Lord Tarly. Refusing a walking stick, yet again, Stannis stepped slowly through the gardens of Harrenhal. Before he had little time for such nonsense, but as the stress piled on, he had developed a newfound appreciation of nature's beauty. The dragon whore thinks herself impenetrable on her dragon. Dorne proved Rhaenys wrong, and we shall prove her wrong. With a reputation as an even harder, more sour-faced lord than even Stannis, Randyll Tarly's contemptuous expression gave nothing away. It was his only face, so the king didn't find himself dissuaded. I am a brave warrior, but the idea of dragons does or did make me pause. The image of the scorpion, as Baelish called it, sending the massive projectile punching through stone. It filled Stannis with resolve. King, prince, that was promised. Dragon Slayer. Titles he would take to his grave as the greatest monarch the Seven Kingdoms had ever seen. My army is strong. Riverlands, North, Wildlings, Vale, and Stormlands. Generalized by myself and the White Wolf of Winterfell. You were the only one to ever defeat my brother in the rebellion, so I cannot think of a better man to serve as my general alongside Jon Stark. Randyll slowed his pace, not wishing to burden the Stag King. What does give me pause are the actions of my liege lord. Stannis frowned. Scowling. Tyrell is a puppet. The real strings are pulled by the Queen of Thorns, and she is too blinded by revenge. Even he hadn't expected Cersei to detonate the Sept of Baelor. Revenge is well-deserved, but not allying with a foreign whore. She was born in Westeros, Word of Lady Tyrell's alliance with Daenerys Targaryen had hit Hornhill like a comet. He had dutifully answered the call when Mace Tyrell backed both Aerys and Renly. But this was a different matter entirely. Randyll didn't know what to think. Cersei has no claim, an adulteress and usurper. You do have a claim, Your Grace, but so does Daenerys Targaryen. A claim her father gave up when she burned the Starks alive, when his rapist son stole and murdered Lyanna Stark. Pausing, Stannis turned to look the shorter Lord of Hornhill in the eye. You know what Aegon did to House Gardener on the field of fire? I understand the thought that surrender and bending the knee would save you, but the nobles of Meereen thought so. Daenerys Targaryen butchered them all, crucifying them and feeding her dragons with their corpses. Just think, have you done anything in your life that could raise her ire, supporting my brother perhaps? Eyes narrowing, there was silence as Randyll digested the statement. Any rebuttal hesitated, Stannis' words truly terrifying him for a moment. I'm a Tully, it means something. I do not betray my oaths. I do not kill my kin with blood magic. Anger welling inside him, Stannis willed himself to be calm, the same indefatigable control that kept him in the Game of Thrones after all others had written him off. Olenna betrayed her oaths when she allied with a woman raised in Essos, a woman that heads an army of slaves and horse-lord savages in to destroy everything before them. I do not wish to see this land burned and defiled, and I doubt the man I shall name Warden of the South does either. At that, Randyll merely raised an eyebrow. Warden? Stannis scowled and grunted hard before stomping off, leaving the Tarly to his thoughts. As his eyes opened wide, he knew it was morning. He hadn't been looking forward to this day, knowing what it meant. He'd be leaving his family again. They'd go north. He'd go in the opposite direction. It was possible that they'd never see each other again. Jon had fully considered this the last time he left them in Winterfell, yet he had been reunited with them again at Harrenhal. This goodbye would feel far more final. Even as he laid under the firs, he comprehended that fact. Therefore, he took his time preparing himself that morning. Once the cloak hung across his shoulders, it felt a bit heavier than usual. Even the morning air didn't feel as good as it normally did. The cool breeze always calmed his senses, but not this morning. This morning it only made him sigh, because of what the sun rising on that day truly meant. It laid heavy on his heart, but stiffened and pushed it down. Stomping out into the camp, he knew that his sisters would likely be getting prepared to leave. Sainseur's red hair made her stand out. He noticed her from across the encampment. As Jon approached, Arya breezed by him, giving his shoulder a light push. "Where are you going?" Jon called after her. But Arya turned around to smirk at him before reaching Sansa. Before he got close, he stopped, just so he could gaze up the sight. Arya and Sansa appearing somewhat friendly to each other. Not warm by any stretch of the imagination, but compared to what Jon saw out of the two of them when they were young, this is quite different. They're able to hold a conversation without arguing. Often Sansa might even let a smirk, and Arya will constantly tease, though not with malice. They almost look like sisters. Arya clearly expected Jon to have joined them by now, because she turned back in his direction, causing Sansa to do the same, who said, "Jon, are you going to stand there all day?" The eldest brother didn't reply, though he did finally walk over. The two girls' eyes scanned over him as he stepped through the mud. "Always so sullen," Arya said. "What are you thinking about?" Jon looked away from them, seeing his sister's horses getting ready to ride. "This could be the last time we see each other," he eventually said. "Why would you say that?" Sansa asked with a frown. Shrugging, Arya added, "It is possible." "What is wrong with both of you?" "So I'm going to war, Sansa," Jon said, flatly. "For real this time, and this time there's going to be dragons. For the first time, I'm wholly uncertain of the future." "You're not going to die, Jon," Sansa said, trying to reassure him. Her brother simply locked eyes with her, saying all he needed to. Suddenly, she crashed into him, wrapping her arms around him. Jon reciprocated the embrace, closing his eyes. Arya stood by, watching. "Don't worry, Sansa," Jon whispered. "Don't worry about me, you all will be fine." He let Sansa go, and she backed up to compose herself, while Jon looked at Arya, who did finally show a bit of emotion on her face. They hugged moments later, but not as long as with Sansa. Arya huffed and punched Jon on the arm. "Don't you dare die, big brother. I'll do my best." Sansa returned to them next, still sniffling a bit, Just come back, Jon, please. I will. I've been lucky so far. Jon could only say, not having the heart to leave Sansa in suspense, even though he truly had no clue if he'd ever see Winterfell again. The two of you, just stay safe. Nothing I do matters if anything happens to either of you. What about Rickon? Rickon too, Jon smirked, shaking his head. Give him my best. The presence of others arriving near halted the conversation. Brienne and Podrick approached, Ghost trailing them, tongue lagging out of his mouth as he scampered about, excited for a new journey. Jon turned to them and smiled. Lady Brienne, Podrick, both of you ready? What? Sansa said. Jon regarded her. They're going with you, as well as Ghost. Why? I'll feel better with all of them accompanying you. Brienne stepped up. I made a solemn vow to your mother, to protect you, Stark girls. It's high time I make good on that vow. Arya leaned her head to the side and raised an eyebrow, eyeing Brienne. As long as we get to spar, I think I can oblige that. They didn't talk much as the sisters mounted up. Jon sat by looking on, noticing Podrick's eyes lingering on Sansa longer than the boy probably realized. He wasn't sure how exactly he felt about that, but the lad was at least the most non-threatening man he knew. Falling to his knees, he embraced Ghost, giving him one last flurry of scratches. Take care of them for me, boy. Ghost merely licked his face, causing Jon to laugh. Good. The two Stark sisters, Brienne and Podrick, all on horses, with some accompanying Stark bannermen and the White Direwolf, neared the time to depart. The bannermen went on first, galloping into the forest, then Brienne and Pod, the two Starks and Ghost, stayed behind a few seconds longer, looking back at Jon, who smiled and gave them a small wave. Arya nodded and left. Sansa pursed her lips, calling out to Jon, "The lone wolf dies," before following after her sister. Jon rocked back, huffing a bit. But the pack survives. Ghost merely howled. The winds were strong that day, howling fiercely over Dragonstone, tall grass of the volcanic fields blowing from the gusts passing westward towards the Crownlands. There were clouds above, large, fluffy dollops of white that obscured the winter sun. But behind to the east, cresting over the horizon, there was nothing. A sheet of blue, heralding a perfectly sunny week to descend over the lands that Aegon the Conqueror had looked at hungrily over 3 centuries before. Exactly the same lands as Daenerys Targaryen looked at, violet eyes narrowed in resolve. To the right, Viserion took off from his perch atop the cliffs, joining his brothers above. All 3 dragons enjoyed the winds, letting them soar effortlessly over their ancestral home, to seek the freedom only dragons could bear witness to. Coldest morning, your grace. Daenerys turned her eyes to see Lord Varys walk up beside her, huddled under his robes, shivering. She tightened her cloak around her petite form as well. Yes, cold. It didn't really bother her, not with the blood of the dragon flowing hotly through her veins. The feeling of impending triumph. You did well, sending that last message about our lack of men. Nodding, Varys rubbed his hands together, likely to warm them. Information wins wars, your grace. His ruddy face and narrow eyes stared out to Blackwater Bay before them. It's time, isn't it? Before them were the hundreds of ships of the Targaryen navy, each loaded to the brim with thousands of unsullied Dothraki and Second Sons. Already having disgorged thousands upon the plains of Crackclaw Point, Dacrio and his scouts going ashore a week before. Enough to form the largest army Westeros had ever seen in many decades, ready to fight for the queen they chose. The smallest of smirks formed on Daenerys' lips. It's time. Slashing through another neck of a Stark bannerman, Dario snuck further into the small encampment. They'd been tracking the scouts for miles. If they wanted their moments to stay unseen, tracks needed to be covered. 3 more bannermen sat around a fire. The one standing on the edge of the camp just fell to the ground. Feeling confident, Dario stepped out into the open. Seeing him, the Starks rose and drew swords. Tesk, Dario said, waving a finger at them. Don't even try it. We outnumber you. Then his outstretched hands signaled the 7 other Second Sons. Come out of the brush. Drop your swords. Without hesitation, 2 of the men tossed their swords aside, but the third chided them. What are you doing? We can't surrender. But you should. The alternative isn't so good for you, Dario remarked, twirling his special blade through his fingers. With a huff, the final man dropped his blade. Good man! I like a man who does what he's told. He turned to his men behind him and nodded, saying, "Leave one for me." With that, the second sons took off after the Starks, lashing down 2 of them to bits. The third took off running into a clearing nearby. Daenerys followed close behind, yelling after him, "Oh, we got a runner!" He pranced after for a while before burying his dagger in the man's back. The poor fellow fell on his face in the grass, skidding for a bit. Daenerys ripped his blade out only to force it back in the skull for good measure. Rising, he wiped the blood off on his tunic, happy for a good day's work. "It's better you fucks don't see us coming," Dario said to himself. "It'll be more fun." The Stark, Tully, Wildling, and Crannogman had been traveling for a fortnight at least since leaving Harrenhal. Their forces are mostly on foot, so progress is rather slow. Just merely cutting off Cersei's supplies didn't seem like an insurmountable objective, but walking for miles and miles makes any man a bit reckless and careless. They reached a clearing, finally, strolling out into an open field. Jon Brynden, Edmure, and Howland rode out front. Behind them, Tormund and Corsi engaged in an argument about who would win in an arm wrestle. The fully volley of troops laid behind all of them. "How long ago did we send out the scouts?" Jon asked to no one in particular. "About 2 days ago at first light," Edmure replied, gazing over the open land. "Shouldn't we have seen them by now?" Brynden grunted and spat. "Aye, we shoulda." "They most likely just got held up. They'll come around soon," Jon said calmly, as if he was trying to make himself believe it. "I wouldn't worry too much about it," Edmure huffed. "There's no one out here but us and farmers." Trotting up next to Jon, Howland said, "So why are we out here again?" Jon smirked. "We need to cut off Cersei's supplies. There are many farms out here that supply her." They watched the lines of men marching through the rather beautiful temperate day, Northerners belting out bawdy songs, wildlings scarfing down plentiful food and drink plundered from Crownland's knights. Loyal to Cersei, they were marching further south than Robb Stark had ever hoped. "This is for you, brother." Cersei was the last in the rogues gallery that wronged his family, unless Daenerys Targaryen could be grafted onto her father's crimes. Cersei will be weakened, and when his grace returns victorious from Highgarden, perhaps the lords of the Westerlands will. He was interrupted by Howland, who raised his finger. "Shh! Listen. There was nothing. No, listen." At that point, Jon heard it, a low rumbling from the hills to the east. "Lord Tully, are you sure we don't have to worry about those scouts?" "King Crow," it was Tormund, racing atop his horse. "The wargs! Saw a whole fucking horde coming for us." "What? Black-clad fuckers and swarms of horsemen. They'll be here soon." As if confirmation, the rumbling had grown into a veritable thunder. Whoops and screams, starting to boom like a wave. "Nothing to worry about," the Blackfish snarled, smacking his nephew on the back of the head. "Just when I thought you had some fucking sense." Jon had no time to allow recriminations. Form up, get into positions, face east. At their commander's direction, the other lords raced towards their commands. All jolly marching and body singing ceasing as they quickly formed into shield walls. Cavalry waiting at the flank. It took less than half an hour before they saw their opposing forces. A solid line of black-clad pikemen marching in lockstep towards them at an almost inhuman pace. A swarm of horsemen screaming battle cries as they surged across the grassland. The might of Essos gathered by the Dragon Queen to wipe them all out. Men trembled, men puked, fear predominating. Howland, Jon grimaced, knowing exactly that this was going to be the battle of his lifetime. "Take some of your men and get out of here." "I can't leave," Howland said, somewhat flippant. "I'm with you." "You have to go," Jon insisted, grabbing the older man by the collar. "Get out of here and get a raven to my sister. Tell her what happened." "You don't think—" "Just go," Jon exclaimed, not sparing another glance at Howland as he finally galloped away. His eyes stayed focused on the hordes of Dothraki and Unsullied streaming down the hill before him. Brynden drew his sword next to him. "We can hold them." "There's too many," Edmure said, trembling. "We'll fucking hold them," the Blackfish yelled. He may have started to yell commands if the noise the clambering Dothraki horses wasn't drowned out suddenly. A shrill screech filled the air. Everyone knew what it was. A great fire-breathing beast poked through the clouds on the horizon. Ducking down closer to the ground, it looked as big as a castle. The black dragon neared the lines of bannermen long before the foreign droves did. "Take cover," Jon yelled as loud as he could, but no one had any time to move. White-hot flames poured from the black beast, incinerating a large chunk of Jon's forces, leaving only ash for the wind to blow aside, gaps large enough for the Dothraki and Unsullied to exploit, their double-quick trots and marches turning into an all-out charge straight for them. Trumpets and horns blaring out the new orders as they took advantage of their queen's entrance. Flames bathing him in heat, nearly knocking him to the ground. Jon stared at the massive hole blown through his lines. Some men screaming, running in every which direction awash in the searing inferno, some others shockingly still, a few stumbling a few steps before collapsing while most laid on the ground dead. And at the center of the strike was nothing but ash blowing in the wind. What had to be 100 men, vaporized. Unable to blink, either because of the ash in his eyes or out of sheer fear, Jon watched the dragon bank off, petrified as more fire flowed, roasting more of his army. His mind immediately flashed to his vision in the flames that Melisandre showed him. A large black dragon burning Stark bannermen. It was true. The thought didn't seem possible at the time. Yet, here it is. His commanders were breaking down. "Fuck." Tormund clutched his head in his hands. "Did you see that? Fuck. We have to fall back." Smaugilin snarled in his ear. Hopeless, hopeless. All Edmure could think of was King Merngardener, marching to his fiery death upon the field of fire. Undulating cries of the Dothraki horde gaining closer and closer while the sunlight gleamed off the spear points of the unsullied phalanx plodding forward. Jon's attention was focused on the great black dragon, wings flapping hard as it banked right. Atop its back, Jon could make out a thatch of silver hair, Daenerys Targaryen in the flesh. He had heard the rumors, how she was both brutal with her enemies but freed the slaves of Slaver's Bay. She won't burn her own men. He made his decision. Smacking the whimpering Edmure, Jon screamed at his command. "Charge! Get among the cunts!" Longclaw spinning in his wrist, the Wrath of the North leapt over the faltering shield wall and charged on foot at the onrushing Targaryen host. Charge! Wide eyes just stared at the seemingly mad Lord of Winterfell, challenging unsullied pikemen and a Dothraki horde all by his lonesome. It was crazy. It was reckless. It was the best fucking thing any of the soldiers had ever seen. "Protect your lord," Smaugilin bellowed, greatsword lifted into the air and leveled directly at the enemy. Northerners surging forth for their beloved White Wolf. "Forward, you cunts," hollered the Blackfish, dragging Edmure as the rivermen followed. Tormund, along with all the free folk, merely screamed a piercing howl, their trusted war cry, one that sunk fear into Crow, Northmen, and Westermen alike. Anchored in the center by 1-1, they charged right for the join between the unsullied right flank and the Dothraki. Wind biting at her eyes, Daenerys clenched tighter to Drogon's spines, gritting her teeth at the tight bank over the rolling hills of the central Crown Lands, a place that her ancestors, Aegon, Rhaenys, and Vazemia, had once soared over in their conquests. A conquest she would be attempting alone. It was sobering, the last Targaryen facing the prospect of burning to death, brave soldiers without any other to provide comfort, to provide a warm embrace to wash the pain away. "You are the blood of the dragon." A dragon does not plant trees. Her nature, her blood, her destiny. She would not feel anger at herself for being who she was. Musing interrupted by a hoot from Drogon, Daenerys followed his head, as if her son was gesturing to the battlefield. Peering down at the clashing armies, Daenerys couldn't believe her eyes. The usurper's dogs. They weren't running away, but charging directly into her forces, slamming hard into them, breaking most unit cohesion for either side. 7 fucking hells. The mother of dragons wouldn't burn her own men. Drogon, Illidan, her child roared and complied, plummeting towards the earth below. Time seemed to stand still, as the two hosts slammed into the other, Northmen and Wildings crashing into the line of Unsullied, Phalanx shuddering with the frenzied bloodlust of the first men, their disciplined lines used to withstanding Dothraki charges, sellsword companies, or the light slave soldiers of Essos. The mighty fighting force were woefully unprepared, as the men-at-arms and berserkers literally hacked and clawed through them, yanking the front line by their spears or shields, axes, swords, and knives, making quick work of them. Mounted knights and horsemen of the Northern Riverlands followed Lawrence Hornwood into the Dothraki horde, nearly 5 times their size, screening the wildlings and their fellow rivermen. Lances and greatswords sighed through the feared screamers and their mounts, strong Westerosi horses leaping over gory bodies of man and horse alike in their mad charge. Daenerys had proclaimed that the Dothraki would tear down the men in metal suits, yet none amongst the horde knew how truly difficult and bloody that would be. While most of the archers followed Karis's lead and surged forward to engage the Dothraki and Unsullied at point-blank range, 100 brave souls had stayed behind, loosing volley after volley at the unarmored swords and horsemen, forcing the armored phalanx to slow to a crawl, shields up to protect themselves and losing their momentum against the attacking men-at-arms. Their commander, a bastard archer from White Harbor by the name of Simon Snow, yanked back his bowstring and let the steel-tipped projectile fly, not knowing that it would punch through the leathers of a second-son lieutenant, almost running a lance into 1-1. Hearing the great dragon roaring in, he barked the order "scatter" while knocking another arrow and firing. Daenerys spotted the target, a part of the great clashing masses of friend and foe. Men already breaking. Rizikreitsli, a split second passed before Drogon's maw ignited, a torrent of dragonfire lancing down to envelop Simon Snow and over half of his command into ash. Wingbeats sending a dozen others sprawling into the trodden ground as the black dragon gained altitude. Some sent arrows at the beast, but the few that hit bounced off his scales. Axe crushing through both artery and windpipe, splattering blood over the ginger beard. Tormund kicked the lifeless husk of a former slave soldier back into the next one. "Go for their throats," he bellowed, leaping over the corpse to engage the one in the rear, ignoring the spear point grazing his side. "Fuck you, cunt motherfuckers." "Orlimir Kogran!" Grey Worm marshaled his forces in the initial assault, ordering them back, which the unflappable elite spearmen did. "Rosier Acrio!" Spears bristled outward, stabbing through the thin or non-existent armor. While the ground was carpeted with the black-leathered unsullied dead, the berserker charge of the first men began to peter out into the confused, bloody melee, bristling spears of the phalanx locking with the pikes of the Winterfell, formerly Bolton men, free folk, and men-at-arms continuing to try and hack their way through one line at a time. Bashing his fist against an Unsullied's chest, feeling bones crack as the unit collapsed, ears picking up nonsensical but authoritative words coming from a specific figure, Tormund leaped at the man in charge. Anyone barking orders had to be important. Hearing the piercing battle cry, Grey Worm managed to spot the charging wilding, red-bearded face, looking like a fire demon from the sermons of the Red Priests, just quick enough to stab forward with his spear. But Tormund was quicker, ducking out of the way and grabbing the shaft, yanking forward and pulling Grey Worm out of the formation. Unable to wrench the spear away from his enemy, he drew his knife in his left hand and swung downward with his axe. Blocked by the shield, Grey Worm drawing the spear back and leaping into the furious duel. Fist crashing against his back, Jon cried in pain as he spun Longclaw, stabbing back and impaling the sellsword through the stomach. Only minutes into the battle, he was already bathed in blood. Some his, most not. A pair of Dothraki charged at him, only for David and Lord Castle to engage on horseback. Brawler's no match for the trained swordsman. Drawing the Valyrian blade out of the dead second son, he jerked his hand to quickly clash against an Unsullied spear point thrust directly at him, almost skewering him through, if not for deflecting the steel point with Longclaw, blade twirling to slice the spear in half. Jon slashed across the former slave soldier's chest with a snarl, Unsullied staggering, but keeping his feet and charging. Fuck. Shield smashing against his boiled leather cuirass, Jon was pushed back half a dozen paces before he dug his feet into the ground, bashing the wolf's head pommel on the Unsullied's helmet. The unexlaved soldier was tough, but not that tough, disoriented enough for Jon to bellow a war cry and swing Longclaw, beheading him. There was no time for the Lord of Winterfell to even catch his breath before disemboweling a dismounted Dothraki screamer, guts spilling on the dead grass. Another wave of heat slammed into his body, blood and sweat close to boiling, when the Dragon Queen roared above. Flames blanketing the hills to their west, hemming us in. Taking note of the carnage all around, the only way to win would be to knock the dragon out of the sky and hack their way through the foreign hordes. Not bothered by the heat, rather reveling in it, the fire driving him to a new sense of ferocity that only ice had before. Jon raised his sword and lunged towards a cluster of spearmen. Not 1 hour into the clash, and already the blood ran like a rain-swollen river over the cold, dead stretch of the Crownlands. Piles of corpses, broken, burnt, and hacked apart, littered the ground. Lines of Dothraki screamers jumped off their horses at clumps of men-at-arms in a frenzy of bloodlust, others clashing with the stalled heavy cavalry charge or engaging in a long-range duel with Carsey's wildling bowmen. However, even their vaunted courage and disregard for their own lives were broken in the face of the massive 1-1. The giants' large hands ripping blood riders in half and crushing Unsullied underfoot, only beaten by the wrath of the North and morale boosting for the Northern Army. An attempt to shatter the attackers by the Dragon Queen was beaten back as 1-1 tossed a still-kicking horse at the mighty dragon. Not enough to hurt, but enough to break Dragon off. A cheer rose from the Northmen, free folk, and rivermen as they threw themselves again at the Unsullied and Dothraki, knowing their only salvation was in advance. This was understood by Daario Naharis. Commanding the far left of the Targaryen line, his second sons had been raining arrows into the warriors of House Umber and House Surin for minutes, trying to soften up the tough Northerners. Out of options and in need of a breakthrough, he spun his Ariak and led a furious charge, sellswords whooping as they rode. "Stay firm, you cunts," Sma Jon snarled. Boring it on the man just to the right of the standard-bearer, he darted forth and aimed the slice of his greatsword for the horse's legs. Daario tumbled to the ground as his horse let out an agonizing screech, scrambling to his feet just as the Northern Lord hacked at him, power and strength clashing against agility and speed. Drawing Longclaw out of the stomach of a limp Unsullied, Jon managed to find the Blackfish in the middle of the chaos. He was covered in soot, the ash of dozens of his comrades. "Dragon Queen immolated our center," he coughed. "Took all of our reserves to patch up, and still the horse savages got 100 men into our rear. Find that shit. Dalish got us and take it out." In the fog of battle, Jon had forgotten. "Where are the crews?" "Fucking dead for all I know." Another roar as Drogon made another pass. Dozens of men caught out in the open, going up in smoke. Looking out, Jon found one of the wagon tenders' wheels knocked off and the bed leaning on its front axle. Dothraki blood riders screamed through the area, slaughtering any Northman they could find. Fucking hells. "With me!" Blood splattering off Longclaw as he spun it into position. Jon booked it for the Scorpion, Rivermen forming a wedge to protect their commander. Why, Tormund slammed his axe into Grey Worm's shield. "Won't you?" The Unsullied pushed back, swiping with his spear, which Tormund leapt over. "Fucking," he charged, bashing against the shield. "Die." Muscles straining. Helmet knocked off, what had to have been hours before. Grey Worm narrowed his eyes and surged forward, a hidden reserve of strength, knocking back the burly wilding, raising his spear to skewer him through the middle, when a trio of stampeding horses separated them, forcing them apart in the slaughterhouse. Sensing this, knowing the ultimate plan, the commander of the Unsullied whistled. "Hakagan Arli," the order carried down the line. "Hakagan Arli Seguorgon Cloggergrod." Slowly but surely, the Unsullied, joined by enough of the Dothraki still on horseback, began pulling back to regroup. All his guards had left him, sheering off to engage the Dothraki, leaving Jon a straight shot to the Scorpion, which he took. Keeping low and trying not to be noticed, Andal, apparently not well enough, dismounted, towering at least a foot higher than Jon. A blood rider was coming right for him, long braid almost brushing the backs of his knees, the curved blade in his meaty fist, looking like a child's toy. Jon was struck with a sudden sense of déjà vu to fighting the Tin Magnar at Castle Black, only the blood rider was even larger. Snarling, he raised the arak and swiped at Jon. Only just ducking, Jon slashed at the Dothraki, rocking back and swinging his arms to redouble the attack, aggressive charge, gouging a shallow cut on the broad chest and putting his foe off balance. The blood rider sneered, flushing an enraged red at the small Westerosi, not dying from the first few strikes. Roserek back in the fight, the wound slowed him down little as it furiously clashed with Longclaw. The burly Dothraki was far more agile than his size made him seem, meeting Jon's every attack, forcing the White Wolf on his heels with his strikes. A strong slash nearly knocked Longclaw out of Jon's hands. Hilt twisting around to slam into Jon's shoulder, he cried out in pain, but sprang back, feet firm on the ground. Before he could counterattack, the blood rider charged into him, getting inside his swing radius and using his bulk to knock Jon onto his back. Jon landed with a grunt of pain, eyes finding the Dothraki bruiser, leering, readying a death blow when an arrow punched into his shoulder. It didn't slow him down, but proved enough of a distraction for Jon to spring nimbly to his feet and slash from the left. Valyrian steel cutting through flesh to cleave the massive Blood Rider in two, but not before he had claimed a victim. Jon knelt, pulling the Free Folk chieftain in his arms. "You'll be fine." Cersei smiled as the life drained from her. "Get to it, King Crow, before we all die." She went limp in his arms. Jon needed no prodding. Remembering just how Littlefinger's men operated the machine, he bounded onto the wagon and brought it around, muscles straining to cock it. "Devon, get thee over here." Covered in blood, the squire raced over. "It's not mine, at least most of it isn't," he explained. "Can you walk without dying?" "Yeah." "Then get your ass on this wagon and load the bolt." The fire raced through Daenerys' veins. "Let's go, my child." Elagon. He beat his wings and dove, rocketing towards the enemy. Load, bolt securely in place, Jon swiveled it towards the coming dragon. The sun was high in the sky, but the black beast was just below it, eminently visible against the blue of the cloudless sky. Come on, monster. Dracarys. Drogon's mouth opened wide. It sobered Jon. Shifting ever so slightly, he released the trigger mechanism. Bolt racing rapidly towards the dragon, serrated steel tip punching through the scales of Drogon's shoulder, cutting through his flesh, and shooting through the exit wound, through and through, but one that knocked Drogon off course with a loud shriek, forcing a frantic series of wing beats to stay upright. "You got him, my lord," Devon cheered. Jon didn't rest on his laurels, reload, and he heard it. A roar of hooves from the north. Narrowed eyes suddenly widening as he spotted thousands of fresh Dothraki screamers charging across the plains, thundering south to complete a classic envelopment, one that would annihilate his army. 7 hells. The battle was over. All their sacrifice, all the blood spilled to near triumph over a numerically superior enemy, yet again ending for naught. He would have cried had he been less wary. "Run!" Devon's scream, grabbing his attention, the ear-splitting roar of the black dragon as it slammed onto the ground just before him would have only a split second later, amber eyes blazing with anger and hatred, one he knew the beast's rider shared. Jaw opening as sparks sizzled within, Jon reacted and dove, just barely escaping the blast radius before the scorpion was immolated in searing dragon fire. Daenerys' smirk was wide in triumph as she ordered Drogon into the air, ready to finish off the enemy army once and for all. Coughing, hacking up whatever last meal was in his stomach, Jon found a shadow draped over him. "Get up, King Crow." Tormund, bruised and battered, but still intact. "Looks like we're fucked." Aye, Jon saw several of his subordinates crowding around him, all dismounted. "Any other scorpions?" Castle shook his head. "One broke down about a mile back. The other was incinerated with the archers. Perhaps one... Shaking his head, Jon sighed, running a hand through his filthy, blood-matted hair. "Sound the surrender." Admiral Tully's jaws dropped. "We've got them on the run." Jon grabbed him by the collar and forced him to look at the northern horde. "Look at it. We're exhausted and bloodied, and those are fresh troops with a fucking dragon. The scorpions are gone. It's either death or surrender, and I won't be Mern fucking Gardner. Do you understand? There were no further naysayers. Sound the surrender." Daenerys could have hugged Grey Worm for his ingenuity. The main assault force pulled back, ragged but in decent enough order. The much smaller northern force was caught between both blocks of her army and the roaring flames to the west. It exposed the enemy, and feeling the pain of Drogon's wound, the mother of dragons hungered for vengeance. She angled Drogon in a shallow dive. A sight stopped her mid-word. The enemy were tossing down their weapons. Swords and spears sunk into the earth as they waved frantically, many strips of white cloth appearing out of nowhere to flutter in the gentle breeze. Surrendering, they were surrendering. "They are your enemies," one voice snarled within her, roaring like a caged beast. "Set an example, burn them all. It would be easy, and there would be no threat from these men if she did. Much of Westeros would probably bend the knee after." She shook her head. Daenerys had no qualms about burning her enemies, not after the Harpy Rebellion, but not innocents. Not men who willfully surrendered. Drogon Bank. the dragon roared at her command. Shouts and frenzied movements all around Jon. He heard the entire northern army breathe a sigh of relief as the Dragon Queen and her massive beast sharply turned away, soaring off towards the hills to the east. Already, weary sellswords and unsullied approached their lines, spears and swords at the ready in case of a trap. "Keep calm, men," Jon said, voice steady. "If resigned, it's over." "I would have been honored to die by your side, King Crow," Tormund breathed, clutching a cut on his arm. Superficial, but by the way he grimaced it still hurt like a bitch. Jon shook his head. "There's no honor in death. At least now we live to fight another day." Watching as a bearded sellsword approached him, confident swagger and sneering arrogance on display as he yanked Longclaw from the ground, as a spoil of war, Jon realized that for the first time since Yrdia and her band captured him, that he tasted defeat. Dragon roaring in the distance as it landed atop the tallest hill. He hoped that the Mother of Dragons would be as forgiving or gullible as Mance Rayder was. The stench of burnt flesh that lingered on the battlefield made obvious the consequence of false hope. All the men from the losing side were forcefully jostled until they gathered before the hill. The Dragon Queen still sat atop it, gazing down upon the droves of surrendered men. Jon looked up at her and scowled. He knew this wasn't good. A few moments later, her dragon reared up and screeched, trembling the ground and rattling bones. Many of Jon's cohorts fell to the ground in fear, but he stood tall. He was a direwolf of House Stark. He cowered for no one. The Targaryen soldiers were tense, apart from the Dothraki and sellswords looting the corpses of the dead, weapons at the ready, staring at the captured Westerosi as if an exotic troop of mummers which Jon felt his men would look at, these foreigners if the shoe was on the other foot. "It was nice knowing Yai," he heard Small Jon whisper next to him. "They won't kill us," Jon replied, all but certain. Eyeing the various soldiers of the Dragon Queen's army, he grimaced. "The cockless freaks? Probably not, but those horse savages and sellswords, they'll rob us and then rape our corpses." Jon shook his head. "They follow her." His eyes landed on the Dragon Queen. "All depends on her." He hoped she wasn't like her father, though that might have been a false hope. Murmurs of fear and wonder rippled through the prisoners as Daenerys Targaryen descended from the back of the dragon and walked to the edge of the hill, able to get a fully better look upon her. He noticed that she truly was as beautiful as he had heard, if not more so. Flowing silver hair, lithe figure underneath her battle dress, purple eyes still piercingly breathtaking from the great distance. Visenya Targaryen reborn. Though her countenance wasn't full of admiration, just a heavy fierce gaze burning down at him. So, just like Visenya Targaryen. Surrounding her were the advisors she brought with the army, Grey Worm, Tyrion, and her blood riders. One of them was missing. "Where is Coro?" she asked in their tongue. To the prisoners, it only made her seem more foreign. Rokuro shrugged, went through the breach. Didn't come out. Nodding, Daenerys turned to Tyrion, who stood next to her. "A large hall of prisoners," she whispered, eyeing one. "So, giants are real. I doubted I would see that. Pockmarked with arrows and broken off spear points, but still standing like a colossus among the other prisoners. Half the Dothraki archers aimed their bows at him. What would I do with them? You could take them to Dragonstone, but that would be dangerous and eat up supplies. There are still 2 enemy armies to defeat, and we lost many men today." She gritted her teeth. The Wrath of the North had very nearly annihilated much of her army with his aggressive counterattack. "I say let them go." "So they can fight me again?" Tyrion shook his head. "Northerners obey their oaths, and the death of the Boltons only shows the consequences of breaking them. You defeated them, so mercy on your part would behold them to you. Let them bend the knee and keep some of their lords as hostage. They'll keep themselves out of the fight." Her advisor spoke sense. A first of actually decent advice since they landed in Westeros. She didn't wish to be known as the Queen of the Ashes. Clearing her throat, she looked at all the men. "I know what you have heard," she called out to them in a loud tone. "What songs your leaders have sung about me. Stannis Baratheon. I've no doubt he spouted on long about how I've come to burn your homes and rape your lands with my foreign army, but I'm just here to retake what is mine. Cersei Lannister, Stannis Baratheon, they are who stand in my way. This battle is over. You've lost. I am not my father, and will not repeat his unjust crimes against any of my subjects. Join me in ending the tyrannical rule of men who would have killed you outright." She cleared her throat. bend the knee, or refuse, and die. A few dropped to their knees then, instantly. Jon didn't blame them. The rest knelt after the black dragon bellowed at them again. Well, except for Jon, Davin, One, the Blackfish, Edmure, Tormund, and Small Jon. They all stood straight. The next moment, Tyrion Lannister walked up to stand next to Daenerys. Squinting, clearly he was noticing someone among the crowd. He half laughed. Jon Snow? That's Jon Snow. Daenerys frowned, turning to Lannister. What? He wasn't supposed to be here. They'd come with the intention of eliminating a section of Stannis' forces. They thought it was mostly Riverlanders. Only when the fighting began did they realize there were northern forces here. Daenerys had been assured that Jon Stark was with his king, Stannis Baratheon. Well, I see him right there, Tyrion replied. His voice sounded like he wasn't sure himself. Jon didn't show any reaction as two Dothraki came over to bring him closer. They pulled him in front of the crowd. Being closer, Tyrion confirmed his suspicion. He's a bit older, but for sure, that's him. He was most definitely here, said a rather arrogant voice. The bearded sellsword whom Jon had heard called Daario walked up to just beneath the Dragon Queen and bowed. My queen. From his belt he unsheathed Longclaw. Jon fought his blood boiling as Daario presented the Valyrian steel blade to Daario. I present to you the Valyrian steel sword of the Wrath of the North as a token of your victory this day. It rankled Jon to no end to see the blade that had seen him through years of struggle and war, but he hung his head. Nothing to be done. Daenerys cocked her head to the side, staring at him as she leaned down and took the blade from Daario. It felt strange in her hand, light and easy to wield, but as if not supposed to be hers. This is a beautiful blade, Jon Snow. I shall see that it is returned to you when you bend the knee to your rightful queen. She sheathed it, waiting for his answer. Glowering, Jon wrestled himself free of the Dothraki and said, Stark, my name is Stark. The Blood Riders would have hacked him down if Dany hadn't stopped them by holding up her hand. Moments later, she descended the hill to get closer. Tyrion and Daario followed. The Dothraki took hold of him again seconds later. Blood Riders, Daario, and the stone-faced, unsullied commander, who couldn't seem to keep a death glare off Tormund. Not that the wildling didn't reciprocate, forming a protective cordon around her. Daenerys got up close to the Stark, looking him up and down. So, this is the man I've heard so much about, bringing the wildlings and giants south of the wall, killing the Boltons and Freys, defeating Jaime Lannister and his army. I thought you'd be taller. Jon smirked. If I'm honest, I didn't know what to expect out of you. I'd heard so many different things. And what do you think? You are exactly what they said you were. Underneath, of course, he couldn't see. But the visage of the woman before him seemed to be the vicious conqueror he'd heard so much about. A shame, Daenerys sighed, clasping her hands. I would have truly liked your assistance on how to best dispatch Stannis. She turned to Drogon, who began stomping down the hill. Tyrion made his voice known. Your Grace, Jon Snow would make an excellent prisoner. Hating how he would have to swallow his pride, Jon thought of his men, thought of Sansa, of Arya, and Rickon. Knowing he would burn in all 7 hells if he let his own arrogance get Winterfell razed to the ground by a dragon. If I allow myself to be your prisoner, he spoke to Daenerys, will you spare my men? The Dragon Queen regarded him anew. You care about your men. I respect that. Jon Snow and she had much in common, yet fate brought them together as enemies. If they'd bend the knee, she watched him hang his head, but nod. You'll need to bend the knee as well. Not gonna happen. No hesitation. Tyrion saw his queen's eyes narrow dangerously. Don't act rashly, your grace. Perhaps we can get something out of him, given how much he knows about Stannis. Jon spat onto the ground. I won't tell you a fucking thing. Daario got up close. I'll make sure someone takes good care of your sword, bastard. In response, Jon headbutted Daario as hard as he could, forcing the sellsword to collapse, causing a scuffle between Jon and the Blood Riders, who began punching him in the face and gut. Once Daario got to his feet again, blood dripping over his nose, he gave Jon a kick. One snarled, prompting Drogon to roar as well. Enough, Daenerys shouted in Dothraki. Her people stopped immediately. Pick him up. The Dothraki did as they were told, bringing the beaten and bruised Stark to his feet. It seems you do not understand the situation you are in. You've lost. You are in no position to make demands. Her tone was a fit of restrained anger, but almost scolding. My queen, I highly advise keeping Jon Snow alive, Tyrion repeated himself. The North would be more inclined to behave for the duration of the war if we keep their warden as a hostage. It was clear he didn't wish to see Jon die, but at actually thinking him a valuable prisoner or for more personal reasons, they had a decent liking to each other during their travels to the Wall, so long ago. Show these men that you are not your father. Spare Jon Snow. Stark, Jon said, gritting his teeth, still trying to break free. Daario laughed, legitimized by the stacked usurper, no doubt. He has no authority. Keeping her eyes on Jon, Daenerys said, and what use would he serve after I take back the Iron Throne? Do you really expect this man to ever bend the knee? You shouldn't, Jon laughed a bit, his chest aching from where the sellsword kicked it. Because I won't. Will you please shut up? Tyrion told Jon. I'm trying to save your life. Jon allowed himself a genuine smile. Dwarves and bastards, right? A tiny bit of camaraderie with Tyrion, both starting at the same level, more or less, both making something of themselves, only choosing different sides. You have your code, and I have mine. I swore my allegiance to Stannis Baratheon just as my father did, and fuck anyone who would ask me to break my oath. He narrowed his eyes at Daenerys. Seems to me he cares little for his own life, Daario scoffed, pinching his somewhat now cockeyed nose. Burn him and be done with it. His death will be a heavy blow to Stannis. Jon decided if he ever escaped, he would kill this man first. The arrogance enraged him. If you kill him now, the North will never come to heel, Targaryen pointed out. Targaryens have burned enough Starks, but that's all you do, all you ever will, burn. Dragons don't plant trees. Isn't that the saying? Jon said. He watched the surprise wash over the queen. It was me that shot that bolt at your dragon. He smirked darkly as her violet eyes widened ever so slightly. Something in him made him shift course, and only wound the dragon, be it instinct, nerves, or his dreams. Only now he regretted it. Seeing the dragon queen before him, the woman that murdered many of his men and nonchalantly discussed his servitude, the rage threatened to overcome him. I missed, but I wish I hadn't. Maybe some of my men would still be alive. Drogon neared then, looming over them. So close Daenerys reached out to stroke his jaw. Jon's eyes stuck to the dragon, the hot breath fluttering in his face. Never in his wildest dreams did he ever think he'd see a dragon. He just wished it was under better circumstances. Are you scared, Jon Snow? Daenerys asked, her voice low. A mere snort. What's there to be scared of? It's just a fire-breathing dragon. The truth was, it terrified him, not that he'd let her know it. If you're gonna use him on me, hurry up and fucking do it. I ain't got all day, Jon said, scowling. Flashing a smile, her indigo eyes twinkling with a dangerous amusement. Daenerys leaned closer to the dragon. Drakon, she whispered, like a mother to her child. Erneptranaik skoros au pendagon, hen bisavala. Growling loud enough to nearly render some temporarily deaf, Drogon's neck surged forward, jaw right in Jon's face. Maw opening to screech at the bound norther, spittle shooting out, air superheated around him. Bracing his feet, gritting his teeth, Jon willed himself to stand his ground, not conceding an inch to this rather effective intimidation tactic. Only suddenly, the roar ceased. Eyes opening, Jon found the dragon merely staring at him. Amber eyes filled with mere curiosity. Something was different about this man. Yes, he had fired, but the dragon could sense his feelings, his emotions. Pick up that. No, he didn't truly want him to die. That Jon Stark had consciously shifted his aim, for what reason Drogon did not know, but knew that this man was not to be harmed. Drogon sniffed him once, leaned forward to nudge Jon in the chest, then sniffed again, letting out a grunt. As much as a massive dragon could grunt, Drogon turned and ambled several wing strides away, bored. Jon thanked the gods he hadn't pissed himself, but was mollified rather well by the look of dumbfounded surprise on the Dragon Queen's face. How? Why did Drogon do that? Her mercurial, easily angered son would have likely toyed with Jon, made him piss himself from the foul mood. Drogon was in, but the Warden of the North actually calmed Drogon down. A white wolf, alone and wounded in the snow, the images flooded her mind again. There was more to this man than met the eye, not just because of her dreams. If you're waiting for me to shake in my boots, you're gonna keep waiting, because it won't happen. Be your father and burn me, or don't be your father and let me live. At this point, I really don't care. A bit affronted, but the surprise morphing into interest, Dany replied, You are some man, Jon Snow. Stark. Yes, Stark. What have you? Dany sighed, waving her hand in the air. Then she said simply, Bind him. He's coming with us. There was disagreement from Daccio by the way his jaw dropped. But your grace... Enough, Captain Naharis. He's now my hostage. Anyone who so much as touches him against my orders will be killed. Chastised. The sellsword quieted down. From the look on his face, Grey Worm also disagreed, but chose not to antagonize his queen by speaking up. By the noise Jon made, it sounded like he'd rather be burned as the Dothraki drug him off to the side. You made the right decision, Tyrion said. Still next to Daenerys, Your Grace. You better hope so, her eyes narrowed. Remember the promise I gave Varys? Tyrion gulped, remembering it all too well. What about these? Daenerys said, pointing his blade at the others still standing. The Blackfish, Edmure Devon, Small John, and Tormund still stood high. The White Wolf rolled his eyes. Devon, kneel. The squire trembled, but obeyed his lord's orders. Jon was relieved. Davos didn't deserve to lose another son. Smaug, narrowing his eyes at his liege lord, the Lord of Lastarth sighed and fell to his knee. Little Ned didn't deserve to be saddled with running the keep at his young age. With a mere look, Wun smacked his fist against his chest, a sign of defiance. Stark, he grunted, but bent the knee. Daenerys allowed it, pride in herself surging within her chest, a mighty giant bending for her. If anything was a more apt symbolism of her life, she had yet to find it. Tormund, Jon called out next to his friend. Bend your damned knee, don't be a fool. You know how I don't like kneeling, King Crow, Tormund huffed. Don't die for nothing. Don't throw your life away. Live to fight another day. Tormund hung his head, running his fingers through his hair and beard. When he raised his head, he locked eyes with Jon. He shook his head rapidly, but moments later he dropped to one knee, groaning and cursing up a storm under his breath, just leaving Edmure and the Blackfish still upright and defiant. Brynden turned to his nephew and said, Sit the fuck down, boy. What? No, I'm with you. The Blackfish sent his fist in Edmure's cheek, sending him spiraling to the ground. There, I did it for ye. Now stay down. Lord Daenerys said. You won't be bending the knee. Not to you, not ever, the Blackfish scowled. Your father burned my niece's intended alive, and one mad Targaryen monarch was enough for me. No, I intend on dying with my dignity intact. So be it, Dany shrugged slightly as the Dothraki stomped over to drag Brynden away from the others, leaving him out all by himself off to the side, Brynden of House Tully. For the crime of treason against the realm, I, Daenerys Targaryen, rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms, sentence you to die. Brynden, what are you doing? Jon raised his voice. Don't be a fucking idiot. Save yourself. For once the Blackfish coughed up a smile. You are the best of us, Stark. It was my pleasure fighting by your side. The smile never wavered. Brynden Tully, looking like a new man. Fight like hell, and see if you can make something out of all this shit. Someone has to. I always figured it'd be you. Then he turned back to Edmure. And you, stay alive, if you can. Someone has to carry the goddamn name. Daenerys waited until he was finished. The Blackfish stared at her with his stern expression, then up at Drogon, who rose over him. Long before the fire lanced out from the dragon's mouth, Brynden the Blackfish started to yell as loud as he could, making sure all heard his voice. But it was the Dragon Queens that Drogon heard. Dracarys. With that, Brynden was reduced to mere ash, gone in less than a second. Sick to his stomach, eyes closed to see a man he respected greatly be burned alive, one whom he had fought and bled on the battlefield with. He turned away, opening them to find the Dragon Queen directly in his sights, a person he had never thought he could hate more than all the others who had wronged his family, but the current moment proved him wrong. And from the look she shot him, Daenerys Targaryen seemed to feel indifferent about it. Not enjoyment, nor pain, but just like it was something that needed to be done. In a way, that was worse than hate. Open the bloody gate! 4 horsemen galloped through the gateway of Maidenpool at high speeds, only to skid to a halt. The leader leapt off his mount, just as Lord William Mouton scrambled down the steps of his keep. What in seven hells is the meaning of this? He demanded, the folds of fat jostling under his loose doublet. Clearly a lord who preferred the softer aspects of castle life, given he wasn't in the field with his men or his Tully liege. Howland didn't have time to deal with some pompous, soft highborn. Howland Reed of Greywater Watch. I need a raven. A northern swamp, lord. At least Lord Mooten kept up to date on his knowledge. Unless that northern bastard comes here. The Lord of Maidenpool was cut off by Howland grabbing him by the lapel of his doublet, slamming him against the stone of the castle's walls. Guards began to level their spears, only for the three Crannogman's swords to emerge from their scabbards, leveled at the rivermen to protect their lord. Listen here, you fat pig, Howland seethed. The Dragon Queen just set upon the northern army, my men, with a Dothraki horde and her dragon. You're, Lord Mooten wheezed, crushing my windpipe. Either I'll get a raven right now, or I fucking kill you and get your heir to give it to me. Gray eyes narrowed dangerously, the small, unassuming Cranogan turning into the roaring lion lizard on his sigil. Or perhaps I should let the other two dragons I didn't see burn you alive. William Mooten's eyes widened in pure fear. The stories of Aegon's conquest were quite personal to the Mootens of Maidenpool, given they had been the first targeted by Aegon the Conqueror. Now where are the ravens? A fleshy hand pointed towards a tall tower in the northeastern corner, overlooking the mouth of the Trident, releasing him. Howland was already bounding to the tower's staircase by the time Lord William collapsed to the ground, sputtering and coughing. It's been so long. I'd like to say home hasn't changed, Sansa said, sighing a bit. But it has. At least for me, it'll never be the same. Rosier hadn't yet been entirely apprised of all that happened to Sansa over the years. She'd heard whispers, of course, but no one had specifically told her what had happened. Why not? She asked her sister. Eyes narrowing not necessarily at her sister, the elder Stark fought the memories that threatened to bubble up. You don't know everything, Arya? Why don't you tell me? Arya replied genuinely. Sansa's eyes fluttered shut. It's too hard. Too hard? You just don't understand. Silent for a moment, Arya gently leaned over to place a hand on Sansa's shoulder, silently comforting her in a way she never really had before. If you're ready to talk, I'll be here. I've had a hard time too, so perhaps we can share. A soft sigh followed, Sansa smiling softly at her. A knock at the door silenced the talk between the sisters. A servant girl floated through the doorway, once allowed entry. She carried a raven scroll between her fingers. Sansa looked at her and sighed. Who's it from? Colin Reed, by the sigil, the handmaiden replied. Reed? Why would he be sending a raven to us? Arya frowned. Not John? The older sister looked at her sibling, ideas bouncing around in her head. Realization coming across her brain, she grabbed the parchment and unfurled it as quick as she could, eyes fluttering down the inked lines. The words looked to be scratched across in a hurry. Arya sat forward, worried. What's it say? When Sansa didn't reply, just letting the paper fall from her hand to the floor. Arya snatched it up to read it for herself. Sansa brought her hand up to her mouth, closed her eyes, and just slowly shook her head. No words dared to flow from her mouth. After reading the contents, Arya nearly ripped the parchment to shreds. Can't be. It is, Sansa nodded. Howland wouldn't lie. He can't have been beaten, Arya shook her head. He was. She balled her hands into fists. Damn you, John, you promised. Tears pricked her lids. You fucking promised. Sansa began to sob softly, imagining her brother's body a charred husk in some field in the Crownlands. He hasn't died, just captured. We'll get him back. I'll do something. What will you do? Sansa snapped, pushing her tears back. We don't know what's happened. He could be dead. Don't talk like that, Arya frowned. He's not. Daenerys Targaryen attacked him likely with dragons. Do you really think she left anyone standing? Arya opened her mouth to retort, but then shut it just as fast. I'll kill her. You won't. You can't, Sansa argued. Someone has to do something. We have to go home, Arya. We have no other choice. All of our men were with Jon. We can't fight her. Stannis has rode off to Highgarden. He can't help us. We're on our own then. Fine. I like it better that way, Arya huffed, crossing her arms. We have to be smart. You running off to chase Daenerys Targaryen isn't smart. We need you. I need you. Sansa, we must go home. Yeah, Saintier insisted. There is no other option. We'll be safe there. For how long? How long until Daenerys Targaryen flies in with her dragons? We'll be slaughtered. I don't know, I wish I did. We can't just leave him out there, Arya said, not backing down. Sansa pursed her lips. If Jon made it through the battle, she'll likely have taken him prisoner. I imagine he'll be taken back to Dragonstone. Once he's there, I suspect we'll get a raven. Daenerys will want us to swear fealty. What happens after that? We can begin negotiations to get Jon back. A raven has come from Ser Barristan, Your Grace. Daenerys looked up from the map. Lady Olenna has reached Highgarden, and they are preparing to march once the Dornish arrive. Their lords are waiting in Sunspear for Lady Ollaria. She nodded. Good. Our forces will wait in Duskendale until the remainder of the Dothraki make port in Dragonstone. Their casualties were far too high to continue an assault, the Wrath of the North inflicting double the dead and wounded that they did on his men. 10,000, and that didn't count on the chaos and gutted units, even though it happened to her. Daenerys was quite impressed. Once set, we'll sweep over everything in our path. At that moment, the Blood Riders stepped aside as Daenerys entered the tent. While most of the army was exhausted from the brutal fighting of the last day, he seemed almost manic, boredom sated from the bloodlust and grinning like an idiot. Jon Stark's Valyrian steel sword clipped to his belt. My queen, Daario bowed, his eyes twinkling with something Tyrion knew quite well. If he's any more obvious, then he'd be humping her leg. The blue-black splotch centered on his nose worked to undermine the arrogant expression. However, do you mind, Lord Tyrion? I need to confer with her grace alone. There will be no need, Daenerys stated flatly. I am very busy with matters of pressing importance, and I need Lord Tyrion to decipher them. Noticing his put-off expression, grin faltering, Daenerys narrowed her eyes. Do you have something to tell me, Captain Daenerys? He cleared his throat, resolving to try again when she was in Dragonstone. Stress could as easily kill an amorous mood as fighting caused one, and Daenerys Targaryen was not one to simply overpower. The enemy column is heading northwest, back to Harrenhal. I've left my best scouts to shadow them and report back if they attempt to betray their agreement and rejoin with the usurper. That was good news indeed. You made sure they kept their food stocks? While the enemy wagon train was fair game, her first order after letting the Northmen, Free Folk, and Rivermen go was to let them keep their horses, pack oxen, and food. They had surrendered and bent the knee as her new subjects, letting them starve wasn't an option. One that Daario strenuously disagreed with. You should have let my men kill them all, or at least their lords. Cut off the head of the snake and let the rest rot. Killing prisoners violates every convention of war, Tyrion scowled. Do you want her to lose every Westerosi house? Or just the ones that bested you in battle, or knocked you down while bound and gagged? The scowl turned into a smirk. Daario glared at him. War is war, imp. You either fight hard or die. Patting the Valyrian steel sword, he smirked, and I don't intend to die. Anything can happen if you're not careful, Daenerys said in a warning tone, and I will not let my subjects die. They bent the knee, so let them go home in peace. Are we clear? A tense silence, but the Salsword nodded. Is our prisoner ready for travel? Yes, Your Grace, Daario answered. I checked in on him myself. Is he properly secured? Tyrion asked. He must not get loose. An image of Jon storming through their camp, slashing through hundreds of troops, flashed through his mind. The imps still don't know how he had convinced the Queen to spare him. He wasn't about to push his luck. The sellsword scoffed. As I said, I checked on him myself. You have his sword, Dany pointed out, eyeing the blade. Aye, he said, freeing Longclaw from its scabbard. Valyrian steel, Your Grace, I know it will serve me well. Perhaps not. Daario blinked. Your Grace, perhaps you shouldn't carry such a blade, Daenerys said, tilting her head. A swordsman as fine as you doesn't need such a weapon to carry out his duties. You already have a blade, do not? But, ironically, his arrogance had only grown since she tossed him out of her bed. Leave the blade here. You don't deserve it. A little humbling would serve him well. You didn't win it from him. You took it. A proud blade like that deserves someone who actually earned the right to wield it. Remembering how it felt in her hand, even Daenerys didn't feel right with it. Silence so thick it could be cut with a knife. Eventually, Daario did the smart thing and handed the blade to Daenerys. My queen. He bowed graciously, waiting for her nod to turn and leave the tent. Tyrion kept quiet for as long as he could. Well, you certainly put him in his place. He needed it. Will be a far better follower if he knows I won't let him get away with anything. Daenerys placed the sword on the table, marveling it. I can't afford to second-guess myself, Tyrion. If I look back, I am lost, but I can't help but think. You did the right thing, Your Grace. The more Tyrion thought about it, the more he knew it was the only option. Stannis would never have kneeled, and he would have done the same to you had he had dragons. A sigh left his lips. I only wish that it didn't involve such loss of life. Daenerys ran a hand along the fine, smoky blade, eyes fogging over in regret. So do I. She wanted to be the great conqueror, the restorer of House Targaryen, but still, she was Massacred, the breaker of chains. How would Westeros know that if your father didn't treat prisoners well, did he? Scoffing, Tyrion glanced up at her. Good gods, no. Tortured them to no end if they could give him information, and tortured them even if they didn't. You, on the other hand, allowed your Volantian healers to travel with the Northerners as far as Harrenhal, a gracious gesture. Not enough for them to love me, I'm afraid. The people of the North, the Riverlands, and even the lands north of the Wall were her subjects too, and she would break the wheel for them. Jon Stark is key to getting through to them. He certainly got through to Drogon. The Black Dragon seemed to forget he had even been injured, let alone by Jon Stark's hand. What do you know of him, Tyrion? I spent some time with him, a very long time ago, Tyrion said, stroking his goatee. But he is a very different man now. Less of a bastard and a whole lot more man. He's a Stark now. That's given him a new lease on life, it seems. He's bold. Hanging her head had Missandei Barristan, or Ser Jorah, been there, they would have noticed the great mother of dragons bore a similar expression to that of when Drogon burned the little girl alive. I wish he and I would have met under different circumstances. Perhaps then we could be allies. Perhaps you still can be. Aegon, the conqueror, made loyal subjects of those he conquered. A dragon rider, a Targaryen. We are gifted with great power, but also a great curse. None can see my dragons for how I see them. Not even you, my lord, Daenerys sighed. Who could love a dragon? In the queen, Tyrion saw both a mighty dragon rider and a kind soul. She will never go mad. Ruthless, lonely. Yes, but never mad. It was up to him and the others of her circle to keep her grounded, especially since there was no other Targaryen left. Your people love you, was what he finally said. Such was true, but not the whole story. I freed them from chains, but here, I have no love here. I am merely the mother of monsters, the Mad King's daughter. Someone to be hated. I don't have love here, only fear, and how can I break the wheel using fear alone? What could one say to that? Give it time, Your Grace. Aegon eventually found the love of the people in spite of Maidenpool, in spite of the Field of Fire. The Field of Fire, a deep, soulful sigh. Without Jorah, without Missandei, or Barristan, Tyrion was the only person she felt any kinship with, any friendship with. The man had endured a quite similar darkness. All I could see while I flew, while I attacked the Northern Army, I could only think of was all the hardships my house has endured. Stannis was but a boy of 10 and 7 at the time, defending Storm's End against Mace Tyrell. While he was on his brother's small council, I don't think he had any specific role in your family's harm. Gods knew how anti-Targaryen Stannis was now, though. She hunched over the map table, the weight of the world on her shoulders. Too much for a girl of a mere 22, in Tyrion's opinion. Young Ty was bloodless. Meereen was bloodless. Both ended up bathed in blood because I chose to break the wheel. I don't regret fighting for the freedom of the slaves, Lord Tyrion, but with all the blood that has been spilled already by me, I can't imagine the ocean of blood that will follow my capture of the Iron Throne. Tyrion did not know what to say. What could he say? Go check on Jon Stark, she finally broke the silence. Make sure he knows that I won't harm him, and that I truly let his men go. I fear that Daenerys has done the opposite. If Tyrion, or Barristan, as well, as the angel perched on her shoulder, Daenerys was the demon perched on the other side. He is our hostage, but is also the Warden of the North. I want his fealty, Tyrion, and you know him better than anyone else. He bowed. At once, your grace. It didn't take him long to find where the Stark was being held. The 6 unsullied standing guard by the smallest tent in the camp was a dead giveaway. The smaller man strolled up to the men. The Queen sent me. Could you give me a minute? The guards all looked at each other for a few moments before shifting away off to the side. Tyrion entered to find Jon tied to a lonesome post in the middle of the space. He sat down with his head hung over, fresh bruises coating his face and body. Though he looked up when the dwarf came in, he mustered a smirk. Come to finish the job? Hardly, Tyrion scoffed. I couldn't kill you right now, even if I wanted to. The Queen sent me to check on you. Jon chuckled. Did she now? She did. We heard Daario came in earlier. I thought you might need some cheering up. The Stark's face darkened. I'm going to kill that man. I believe you. Unable to help the smirk beneath his bushy beard and mustache, Tyrion grabbed a stool resting on the side of the tent and took a seat. He really is an acquired taste, though for the life of me, I don't know anyone that acquired it. His eyebrows perked up, glad to have someone, even a tied-up prisoner, he could gossip to. I miss Bronn. Braston and Varys were always too serious. There's this old Valyrian sauce made from fermented fish that the Volantines still enjoy. Tastes like rancid vinegar to me. That's Dario Naharis. The Queen keeps him around, Jon said, devolving into coughs. Blood splattered from his split lip. Let him keep my sword. I'll be getting it back, by the way. Tyrion clicked his tongue. He was strutting around the camp with that blade. Lord Mormont's, if I recall correctly, must have trusted you a lot to give it to you. Tired and in pain, Jon nevertheless narrowed his eyes at the imp. Gerald Mormont. A sore spot for him. Doesn't matter. Anyway, the Queen wouldn't let him have the sword. This legitimately surprised Jon. Why? Said that he didn't earn the sword, just stole it. Pushing himself off the stool, Tyrion approached Jon, reasonably certain the Warden of the North wouldn't attack him. She'll give it back to you if you bend the knee. Hells, I think even a simple oath of fealty would suffice. You know I can't, the imp scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. Why even ask me? You know I won't. It's a very reasonable thing to ask, Tyrion said, shaking his head. Then he looked around the dirty tent. It'd certainly get you out of here and back to your home. That'd be enough for me. Not for me, Jon scowled. I've already sworn myself to Stannis. I'd rather die than betray him. There was a momentary silence, seconds ticking past almost like hours. You might get your wish, Jon Stark. A laugh, followed by a groan of pain. Apparently his bruised ribs hadn't healed from where Daario and the Dothraki had kicked him. I won't. That I know for sure. I wouldn't be so confident if I were you. Had Jon been unbound, he would have crossed his arms to match the wry grin. Matched with the fresh black eye and split lip, he bore the roguish charm that served Tyrion's old friend Cerbron so well. That's where you're wrong, imp. See, I may be a northern fool, but I did pick things up along the way. Where I go, the North and the free folk follow. Saints may hold their loyalty in my stead. But if anything happens to me, then all bets are off. He coughed again, blood dribbling down his chin. Tyrion took pity and brought a rag to wipe off the red liquid. Thanks. Your queen can't ever kill me, lest she wants the first Dornish war to look like a bum fight in a brothel. I hardly think Daenerys is scared of some wildlings and a beaten northern army, Tyrion laughed. You only saw a small mite of all her power. What you experienced was just a section of her army, with just one dragon. You do know she's got 2 more? She's no queen if she is scared, Jon remarked, shaking his head. But she'll have to roast my lands to ash if I end up dead. Then she'll just be what she swore she isn't. My people will never bow to her. The North remembers. Isn't that how the saying goes? We never forget, Lord Tyrion. Well, perhaps she can't kill you, but you are a prisoner of war, and I suspect you will be treated as such. Perhaps the cold, dark cells of Dragonstone will change your mind. The hard look on his face softened. I'll see to it that you aren't mistreated, and I think I'll have an ally with that in Barristan. Jon raised his blood-matted brow. Barristan the bold? Aye, her grace's hand. An honorable man, unlike some I happen to be allied with. And some I happen to be allied with as well. He had no illusions about some in Stannis' high command. Eyeing the tired, lost, and pin over, Jon felt some of his defiance leave him. You've come high up in the world, Tyrion. Allowing himself a tiny smile, Tyrion hauled himself back onto the stool. As have you, Jon Snow. Stark. The smile widened. Stark. A moment's silence. Master of War to the Stag King. Chief Advisor to the Dragon Queen. What does that entail? Anyway, Tyrion shrugged. A jack of all trades, really. Give advice, manage diplomacy, basically, whatever the Queen wishes of me. I think I'd go mad without knowing what my responsibilities were. As Lord of Winterfell, I had my men. As Master of War, I had Stannis' war strategy. As Daenerys Targaryen's prisoner, Jon knotted his brows. I guess it's my job now to resist her. I'm no murderer, but I won't be a pushover either. Tyrion, don't think you will break me. The imp hung his head, nodding. I never expected you to, nor does the Queen. Probably why she spared your life, respecting you as someone different than the cunts she's faced in her life. Pushing himself off the stool, Tyrion locked eyes with Jon. I swore to her because I had no choice at first, but eventually, she's the Queen. I chose Jon. The Queen her entire army chose, not because of birth or force or fear. Jon blinked. Why did you choose her? Tyrion smiled. You'll find out eventually, Jon Stark. He turned to leave, hobbling out to the tent flap. I'll send over someone with a proper meal and a cloth bath. Can't have the Warden of the North hungry and covered in blood. Tyrion, Jon called after the dwarf. When the Lannister turned back, he said, What will become of my house if I don't bend the knee? Tyrion pursed his lips and shrugged. Daenerys will want the North to come into the fold eventually. She'll likely do anything to make that come to pass. What happens now is your hands, Stark. With that, Jon was left alone. My lords, try as she might, Sansa couldn't get the gathering of the heads of the northern houses or the heirs, if they were still with the defeated army marching north, to calm down. Rowdy and informal, the staple of the North. For the southern taught lady Sansa Stark, it was something she wasn't used to. Casting Arya a pleading look, the younger sister motioned for Brienne and Podrick. Without warning, both of the sworn swords drew their blades and slammed the hilts into the table, stilling everyone. Good. I'm glad you can quiet down so this meeting can continue. With the three Stark siblings arranged at the head of the table, the announcement of Jon's defeat and capture at the hands of the Dragon Queen, Daenerys Targaryen, had drawn the current fracas. A trail of blown mounts and lack of sleep brought Sansa and Arya back to a frazzled Winterfell. Similar trails bringing in the other lords as well, though many had already been there to begin with. In spite of Daenerys having freed most of the northern army, the topic of her forcing them to bend the knee had already brought them all to a frenzy. Sansa herself was plenty angry for her brother's capture and great-uncle's burning, but she, and Arya, through Rickon, was more numb than angry. But as the acting Lady of Winterfell, she had no time to give in to rage. What the fuck are we just standing here for? Lord Gerwin pounded the table. Send the army back. We'll join with Stannis and roll over both the lion bitch and the dragon whore. Lyanna Mormont glared. You sure speak with bravado, Serwyn? Her tone was icy, looking over the young lord with contempt. Did your bout of stomach consumption heal so quickly after having to flee like a coward back to your castle after North Hill? One taste of battle, and Lord Serwyn had sent himself north, claiming injury. There were rumors that spread like wildfire, but no one had said it out loud yet. His eyes narrowed, leaning in with his ire raised. Watch yourself, little girl. I ain't no cowardly bastard. Jon Stark and Larence Hornwood were baseborn, and yet both of them were twice the man you were. My mother and sisters died at the Red Wedding more of a man than you. Are you questioning my bravery, little girl? The Spitfire of Bear Island did not back down. I'm not questioning your bravery, my lord. I'm denying its existence. Laughs came around the table from the boisterous northerners, Serwyn looking like the vein on his head was about to burst. He surged out of his chair, arms splaying as if to threaten Lady Mormont. The Mormont guards stood, drawing their swords, leading the Serwyn bannermen to draw theirs. Shut up, both of you. Sansa interrupted. Sit back down or my brother will get his direwolf. Sending one more glare to the smug Lyanna, Serwyn took his seat as the guards sheathed their swords, suppressing a smile. The same smirk that Arya wore openly and was planted on Rickon's face, the acting wardeness of the North took control of the meeting. The North is facing the greatest threat imaginable. Its lord, my brother, imprisoned in the south by Daenerys Targaryen. In short, Arya cut in. Either you stop acting like children or I'll make you. One of the smallest in the room, she held more of a presence than even Wyman Manderley, and in that moment it wasn't a pleasant presence. I will not have my brother dying because some cowardly highborn goes off half-knocked. No one would go off half-knocked, Lady Actier, replied Adelais Corstark. 3 dragons, a battered army, no Lord Stark. We're facing the longest winter in 1,000 years. Those men are needed in the north. And so the dragon whore will just get away with it, scoffed Robert Glover. At his older age and poorer health, garrisoning Moat Kylan instead of being with the army didn't look as cowardly as Clayserin. What happens when she comes here to burn us all? Sansa clasped her hands together on the table. The North remembers, Lord Glover. Our memories are long and there will be time enough to act on them, but in the short term we need to prepare for the winter famines and get my brother back. She leaned back, blue eyes giving away nothing. Jon couldn't have selected a better political player to rule in his absence, and Rickon's lack of maturity. Any idea? Toxley Serwyn may have been chastised, but he wasn't by any means silent. A raiding team. Hit the Targaryens on Dragonstone and get Lord Jon back. Could even kill the dragons as Brandon Snow tried to during the conquest. He looked proud of his idea. And I'll take that as a desire to volunteer to lead the mission, my lord, Arya stated sarcastically, watching as his proud smile faded. That idea was brave and foolish when Brandon Snow, the Green Seer, proposed it, and mad and foolish when you do. We have no one who knows Dragonstone's layout, reasoned Wyman Manderly. Say we ignore the dragons and go only for Lord Jon. Any raiding team would go in blind. The man had been a formidable warrior before food and drink got to his figure. The reply came from an unexpected source. Stannis is the official prince of Dragonstone. Walda Bolton, formerly Walda Frey, joined her sister Rosalind and the older brother that had married Tywin Lannister's sister as the only Freys of any title left in the Seven Kingdoms. Controlling the Dreadfort as acting lady on Jon's orders until her baby boy Rhaegar came of age. Sansa intended to have the boy warded in Winterfell, train the Bolton out of him, and cripple House Stark's old enemy once and for all. He could know many people that can navigate Dragonstone. Alistair Thor Stark shook her head. I doubt Stannis would take news of our forces bending the knee well, even under duress. She was visibly worried for her betrothed, the current Magnar of the Thence. It was an unconventional couple, but she was taken by him. I will not risk Jon's life, Sansa announced, putting an end to that discussion. Knowing Stannis, he'll refuse to negotiate until he has the Iron Throne or do something drastic. Brienne's presence behind her. Sansa remembered what she told her about Reinsley's death. Even if Daenerys was killed in the same way, her men would likely take it out on Jon, and she couldn't let it happen. We will negotiate with Daenerys Targaryen directly. That's mad, a random voice called out, and moments later, many voices joined them. She'll kill us all, babbled a frightened Ned Umber, Smaldron's young son. He's probably already dead, Barry Dustin said flatly. At that, Rickon looked at his older sister with wide eyes. Sansa, please tell me that's not true. Robert Glover, from his perch, close to Sansa, leaned in. My lady, you are Ned Stark's true-born daughter. By rights, you should be wardeness of the North and not his bastard seed. Sansa looked at him with a quirk of the eyebrow, concealing her ire at his statement, unlike Arya. The younger Stark daughter wore her rage on her sleeve. Faceless men trained their acolytes to be emotionless. But Jon had always been her weak spot. Glover didn't notice. The Targaryens murdered both your uncle and grandfather when they went south. Don't fall into the same trap. Step back, Lord Glover, Sansa said firmly. Once he complied, she stood. There is one person for whom Daenerys Targaryen will not harm. A person who I am sure would accept the chance to journey to see her yet, also represent my brother's interests. And who would that be? Lyanna Mormont answered, brows furrowing. Suddenly Arya understood. You think the Lord Commander would let him go? In exchange for more men and supplies. I bet, turning back to the lords, she allowed herself a smile. They say Daenerys is the last Targaryen alive, but that isn't true. If anyone could convince the Dragon Queen to let Jon go, it was the mentor and friend that he had gushed about whenever they talked about his time at Castle Black, Maester Aemon Targaryen. Are you sure you wish to take part in this, Miss Aemdier? I am. Despite being able to speak dozens of languages in perfect accents for each, Miss Undaithinath felt the most comfortable in High Valyrian of all of them. A leftover from Valyrian colonizing fleets, the Nathi language had disappeared long ago, leaving it as her native tongue just as much as it was the Queen's. Much as it is distasteful, our queen deserves someone loyal to watch the prisoner's interrogation. Grey Worm frowned as they reached the door leading down to Dragonstone's dungeons. You do not trust the dwarf, either. Much as his fancy words and sometimes logical advice tempted one to trust him, Missandei never forgot how his treating with the Masters ended up, nor his last name being the same as one of the false monarchs currently opposing Daenerys. No, and neither do I trust the sellsword. He's been a good ally, protected Mithiasa from Yunkai to now. Daario Naharis was not someone he was keen on trusting, but the Second Sons were as loyal to Daenerys as the Dothraki were, all thanks to their commander. I've known sellswords before, Turgon Noda, seen them put down slave revolts, threaten, rape. Taking a torch from the hold on the wall, she met her lover's eyes. You did not see him that night, when he held the knife to my throat simply to gain an audience with our queen. The queen took him as a lover. She wouldn't have had she not felt him loyal. I don't think he would betray the queen. Missandei opened the door, turning to speak one last time to Grey Worm. But to impress her, I wouldn't put it past him to do anything, even the worst atrocities. A soft smile graced her lips as she leaned forward to kiss his cheek. Rest in my chambers, Turgon Noda. I'll be back soon. Managing to coax a rare smile from the hardened warrior. With that, she shut the door behind her. Torchlight banishing the foreboding darkness, the black Valyrian-style walls draped over the steps. Missandei couldn't help but flash back to the events of the last few days. Watching as Daenerys landed Drogon upon the cliffs, hugging her tightly, one of the few allowed to do so upon her safe return. The queen had been quite distant. Certainly not the triumphant conqueror, arriving back from a decisive battlefield victory. Even for someone as militarily inept as she was, the scope of the Battle of Duskendale, as it was being called, was immense. An entire enemy army either annihilated or bending the knee. Stannis losing a third of his army and his best commanders. But even then, Queen Daenerys' mind was elsewhere, and it took a day for Missandei to pry out why. Jon Stark. She found the specific cell rather easily. 2 burly Dothraki blood riders standing guard outside of it. The Queen's translator and lady-in-waiting, one of the more well-known members of her council, one of the blood riders, quickly opened the door for her, letting her inside without so much as a grunt. Missandei, nevertheless, nodding at him. Inside, she found both men she had been speaking to Grey Worm about minutes earlier. Lady Missandei, Tyrion bowed, as well as his stature allowed him to. We were not expecting you today. Missandei smiled. The imp was nothing if not polite and charming. This was a last-minute sort of thing, Lord Lannister. I have heard of how this Jon Stark nearly defeated the Darkian Unsullied on the field of battle, and wouldn't properly serve her grace without getting a feel for him personally. Idly sharpening his own dagger, 2 second sons behind him, Daario looked up to give Missandei a wicked grin. Might be a bit too bloody for you, my lady. Wouldn't want to corrupt your innocence. Our orders are to leave Jon Stark mostly unharmed, Tyrion informed the sellsword, crossing his arms. And that's what I'll do. Leave him mostly unharmed. It was clear their definition of mostly diverged pretty greatly. Still, is it truly wise for the dear lady in waiting for her grace to be... A hand held up shushed him. While I appreciate your concern, Captain Navarez, Missandei said, it is not necessary. I wish to give her grace my own conclusions. Daenerys had plenty of advisors and strategists giving her counsel. With Ser Jorah gone, Missandei knew that only she could truly give advice that was for Daenerys, not Queen Daenerys Targaryen. That, and she had to know what this Jon Stark was about. Who is this man that flusters the Dragon Queen, and even tamed Drogon with nary a look? Daario shrugged. Suit yourself. Just stand back by the door. It's gonna get ugly. Missandei frowned, but did as bade, clasping her hands upon her stomach and leaning back against the black walls. Bring him in, the sellsword boomed. From a side door, apparently the Targaryens that built this outpost were in need of interrogating prisoners as their longtime descendants were too unsullied manhandled a figure into the room. He wore a black hood covering his entire face, but Missandei looked him over just the same. Shorter than most men, but still clearly strong. A gray tunic and breeches covered in grime and dried blood. Take the hood off, she found herself saying. One of the Unsullied obeyed instantly, ripping the hood off to reveal a man that had been put through the ringer. Bruises all over his face, scraggly hair, and a ratty beard that hadn't seen a razor for at least a week. much like a hairier version of Grey Worm after the brawl with the Harpies. Pushed into a chair, hands bound, Jon Stark stood straight. He was a warrior, a rather proud one, but Missandei sensed no smugness. "Tyrion," he said in a gravelly voice. From hearing traders out of White Harbor, the translator placed it as northern. Suddenly, bloodshot gray eyes found her. "Who's she supposed to be?" "You look better than before, Lord Stark," the imp began. "This is Lady Missandei, the Queen's friend and translator. She'll be sitting in on our session today." "Both you and the sellsword speak the common tongue," he quipped, eyeing Missandei curiously. Sizing her up as a potential threat, he was smart. "Why a translator?" A laugh from Dario. "What makes you think that you would be the one to ask questions here?" He brandished his dagger, stepping forward. "Lord Jon Stark, Master of War to Stannis Baratheon the Usurper. We still don't know where Stannis is going with the rest of his army. You are going to tell us." Jon leaned back, eyes staring at nothing in particular. "I'm not talking." Tyrion stepped till he was only inches away. "Please, Jon, this war solves nothing, only death and destruction." He placed a hand on his knee. "You've seen our queen's dragons. She will allow Stannis to bend a knee and save himself as she did you and your army. Just tell us where he's going." Making eye contact with Tyrion, then Missandei, and back to Tyrion. Jon smirked as best as he could given his split lip. "I like you, Tyrion, and the translator seems like she isn't a cunt on instinct alone." Missandei felt it was meant as a compliment. The few northerners she had ever met were of a boorish type, but I'm saying a damn thing. Unflinching as Dario approached, Jon appeared stone-like, even as the blade neared to his face. "Where's Stannis headed?" the sellsword uttered slowly. When Jon didn't answer, he pressed the point of the knife to the soft flesh of his cheek. "Answer me or I'll cut you." "Another scar for the collection," Jon quipped, drawing on an innate snark he didn't know he had. Heard maidens swoon over him, so go right ahead. "Swine," Dario scowled, digging the blade into Jon's face. "Dumb bastard." Seeing the Stark's face contort, Tyrion stepped up. "That's enough, Dacier." The sellsword huffed but complied, blade leaving a tiny cut in Jon's cheek. The imp's hand came to his own scar instinctively. "Dwarfs and bastards. You have your lord father's honor, but is honor truly worth this?" "A mere huff," Jon replied. "Honor means nothing if you never live up to it. My father's teaching means nothing if I don't live by the standard he set for me. It's true. You can say my father's honor was what got him killed. Say it all you want, but that won't change me. Even if it gets me killed now, I'd die without shame." Tyrion chuckled. "Honorable to a fault." To everyone's surprise, Missandei spoke up. "A confession would save many lives from both sides, Jon Stark." "I know," Jon whispered, hanging head a bit, "but I still won't." "This is pointless," Tyrion huffed. "Come on, we can't let him off this easy," Dario said, turning from Jon, motioning to the Unsullied. They nodded, brusquely lifting Jon's hands into the air, the Warden of the North letting out a grunt as his shoulders were twisted. "Look at me," Jon said to the sellsword. When Dario did, "Take every breath you can like it's your last. Because when I get out of this cage, I will slit your damn throat. You hear me? I will kill you." Laughing, Dario suddenly buried a right hook into Jon's ribs, making him cry in pain. "Gonna kill me now, wolf fucker." Another punch, this time into his face, reopening some of Jon's prior wounds, causing Missandei to wince. "Where the fuck is Stannis?" Now Jon laughed, leaning back a bit, though with a wince from the blows. In response, Dario crouched down and leaned in close to Jon. "Listen, bastard, tell us where the state is going. If you do, I promise I'll make it quick." Slowly, the Stark lowered his head to face Dierfiau, merely cocking his head askew. All went quiet for a moment, then out of nowhere, Jon spat blood onto the sellsword's face. "Ah, fuck," Dario cursed, standing up to wide the crimson out of his eyes. "Bastard. Not a bastard anymore, cunt." That earned Jon an uppercut to the stomach. "You are if I say you are, bastard." As if on cue, 3 other second sons surged through the gate of the cell. They all surrounded Jon. "Hey, what is this?" Tyrion said from behind them. "Oh, you need all these men?" Jon said, staring each of them in the face. "Just for a little me? Dario, what's going on?" "Don't worry about it, Impen." Then, for Jon, it just became red. The pack of second sons drew in and pounded on the Stark, fists colliding with flesh of his face and of his stomach. With his hands tied behind his back, he was defenseless against the onslaught. He neared unconsciousness, head flying around after a blow, bodily fluid hitting the walls nearby. His face became caked in blood. "Seven Hells, Daario, stop this!" Tyrion yelled out, gripping the bars of the cell ever tighter. None of the men were hearing it, continuing the barrage of the blood. "How you like that, bastard!" Daario yelled at the top of his lungs as he gave Jon a fist to the ribcage. It began to look like an execution, less of an interrogation. Tyrion turned around, looking down the hall behind him. Seeing two Unsullied standing along the way, he called out to them, "You two, come over here and stop this." The two guards regarded Tyrion, quizzled expressions covered by their helms. When they immediately moved, Missandei stepped up. "Come quick, this prisoner needs help." Hearing their mother tongue, the Unsullied stomped over, zooming past Tyrion and Missandei into the cell. A small separate scuffle broke out between the two groups of Daenerys men. Eventually, all the fighting stopped, and Jon was left alone, his body looking a lot more broken than even after leaving the battlefield. Tyrion entered the cell, slowly approaching the unmoving Stark. Jon, when he didn't respond, even with a body movement or grunt, Tyrion bared his teeth. Glaring at Daario, he snarled, "If he's dead, I'll kill you myself." The sellsword held his hands up, but laughed. "I hardly think I'll get more than a slap on the wrist. He's an enemy we need alive," he dolted. Scoffing, Daario took a rag and wiped off the blood from his knuckles. "Sometimes you need a man who's willing to break a few eggs to make the damn meal. Needed that when fighting the Harpies. Needed that when executing that damn freedman. Needed that when getting the queen out of Theos Dothrak. And need it now." Seeing neither the imp nor Missandei wavering, he sighed, motioning for his men to leave. "That piece of shit is going to be the bane of us, mark my words." Not a second later, he was gone with all of his goonies not far behind. Tyrion huffed, holding his hands on his hips, looking Jon over. "He's going to need the Maester," Missandei spoke to the Unsullied in Valyrian, telling them to send word for medical attention. The two guards darted off quickly. Door to Jon Stark's cell, a dank, wet one with many leaks and an unbearable draft, shutting with a bang. Tyrion winced as he made his exit. Side by side with the Queen's translator. "A rather distasteful business, my lady. I'm sorry you had to witness it." Missandei didn't look at him, but there was no real hostility in her tone. "Distasteful would be a quite muted word to describe what I witnessed. Many slave masters were fond of such conduct." By her words, she seemed to speak with personal experience. "I know people with similar tastes. Some are dead, while others are still of the living." The imp frowned. "While there is a sort of satisfaction at seeing someone you despise in that position, though I am rather fond of Jon Stark. Personally, not professionally, mind you, in any event, this whole exercise was one in futility. On the contrary, Lord Tyrion, I found the interrogation to be greatly enlightening." Tyrion glanced up at her with a curious look, brow raised. "Did you witness a different interrogation than I did?" He didn't mean to sound so biting, so he softened his voice. "Jon will never give up, Stannis." She nodded. "Of course not. I can read people, and would advise her grace not to keep interrogating him about it." "Then what did you find enlightening?" Turning to face the Missandei pursed her lips, finding the right words. "I was stolen from home when I was young, impressed into slavery immediately in Volantis, sold from master to master till finally being bought by craziness my Maclas. Only a year before Daenerys arrived in Astapor, they were all men of a certain type. Kind, cruel, it didn't matter, they all had the same lust about them. All men have lust, Lady Missandei. I should know." Chuckling at his own jape, one look at the translator found her in no mood for humor. "Forgive me, please continue." "Plenty had the lust of the flesh, but this was different. A lust for power, for wealth, just for more and more of what they had or what they wished to have. The Harpies and Slavers Alliance, they held this same lust, by the way you describe your sister and the Stay King. They share this, a lust for the chair of swords that overcomes all reason." Such was not unfamiliar to Tyrion. The Iron Throne ought to be at the bottom of a sea of blood that has been spilled by those trying to seek it. He always wondered if King Akin I ever intended for his creation to cause so much death. It was so common that I didn't even think twice when I saw it. But Daenerys Stormborn was different. From the beginning, I knew the queen was genuine. That she sought her power, not out of a desire for it, but truly to do great things. I saw no malevolent lust in them, only a true determination. A sigh left her lips. Daenerys has done many questionable things, and I'd lie if I said that burning men alive, even those that deserved it, sat well with me. But I continue to serve Daenerys with all my heart and soul because she is not like those greedy men and women. Because she is truly a just woman with a good heart. What does this have to do with Jon Stark? She chuckled humorlessly. How he never gave up the usurper, even though every single factor indicates that he should. Missandei pushed herself off the wall. Jon Stark is my enemy, until he bends the knee to her. Grace, but in the entire time I watched him, I never saw one flicker of that same greed. He is as genuine as the queen. With that, she left Tyrion behind to ponder her statement. With a booming crash that echoed across the placid water, the Corvus gangplank slammed into the wooden hull of the ship. Planks ripped apart with splinters shooting off every which way. The ship shuddered. Crew of Ironborn and Dornish bracing themselves for the utter fury about to descend upon them from the massive silence. Theon trembled. Yara pursed her lips, and the sand snakes readied their weapons. There, right at the front of the Ironborn horde was Euron. Eyes wide and a smirk curled on his lips. The scorching wind from the mainland blew his raven locks behind him like a demonic flame, grinning like a madman as the sight of the great castle Sunspear burned in the distance. Niece, nephew, he said mockingly. Not gonna give your dear uncle a hug? Replying with a snarling battle cry. The two Ironborn led their host in a wild countercharge, Euron's laughter roaring as his men erupted onto the deck of the stricken ship. Barely seconds beyond first contact, and the deck had already descended into a slaughterhouse of confused, vicious fighting. Swords hacked into bodies, axes clashing against spears as the archers and crossbowmen fired at anything that moved. The Ironborn siblings waded directly into the fray, killing all in their path, while Euron fought more than one at a time, always winning. Sumeria and Obara made a proper team, the former immobilizing Reavers with her whip for the latter to spear them through. The younger Sand Snake hissed as an arrow cut her, whip lashing out to wrap around the neck of the Ironborn bowman. Obara now, her sister raised her spear. In a flash, Euron buried his axe in the head of Obara, splitting the brain wide open. Flesh and gray matter all over Euron and his blade, caking his face. The Sand Snake simply fell backward, unmoving. Nymeria screamed at the sight, quickly drawing a knife to finish her captive before turning fully to face Euron. Seeing her sibling fall dead, skull split open like a melon. Euron bared his bloody teeth, grinning. That was too easy. Then he snapped his head toward Nymeria, witnessing her face contort. Ooh, I'm sorry, doesn't that make you want to cry? He grabbed the dead sand snake, what's left of her skull. Don't worry, you'll be with her soon. Nymeria charged, screaming, Bastard! I'll kill you! In response, the Greyjoy Lord tossed the sister's dead corpse in the girl's direction. The body took Nymeria to the deck, covering her in her sister's crimson. The weight of the corpse held Nymeria down. Unable to get up, only able to whine quietly as Euron rose up over her, towering, laughing. You dumb bitch, you fell for the dead body throw? He belly laughed, resting his boot on Obara's back, forcing more and more weight onto Nymeria. What a stupid cunt. Many of his men gathered around, having dealt with many of the crewmates. The fleet had been ambushed as they were in port, the battle-trained Reavers of Euron's forces butchering them rather quickly. They made what noises they could, unable to laugh without tongues. Euron leaned down. You see, sand bitch, I don't care either way if you cry. I don't care if you laugh, smile, or plead, because darling, you dying either way. Fuck you, Nymeria spat, growling. You'll die soon enough. Me? Die? No. You must have me confused with someone else. Euron smirked. He didn't give Nymeria a second to reply. Raising his boot high, he stomped on her face with all his might, crushing her nose and cracking her jaw. He started to laugh again as he stepped on her again, and again, and again, until there was nothing left of her head but brain and mush, even going as far to kick through the leftover plasma like playing in the rain. Resting his hands on his hips, he admired his work. Looking around, He saw his crew with bright countenances. "What are you all smiling about? Go find the other two. They must be hiding somewhere." 5 Greyjoy shipmates scurried off quickly to search below deck. Next, Euron gazed around to the other side of the bow. Smiling, he rested his palms on his axe. Seeing what he was truly looking for, his stuck-up niece and pussycat nephew, the two of them fought on top of the bow, near the wheel. Euron twirled his axe, raising his arms into the air as the fighting continued around him, raising his voice over the chaos, calling out to Yakra, "You dumb bitch, it was too easy. How'd you not see me coming? I knew you were going to Sunspear. You knew I wanted to kill you. Only makes sense, I'd cut you off before you got to Dorne." Ydre gripped Theon by the collar, pulling him close to whisper something to him. She rested her forehead against his. "Stop hiding up there, come to face me," Euron bellowed. "Niece and nephew, come to die." Ydre growled, raising her blade above her head. What little men she had left gathered around her. All Euron had to do was lift his arms, and his men did the same. Mere moments later, a brawl broke out on the deck. Ydre leaped down from the bow, Theon close behind. "Ah, there you are," sword in one hand and axe in the other. "Don't you want to give your uncle a hug?" They charged at each other simultaneously, steel clanging together as Euron gave ground, letting them come at him. That the best you can do. A short sword swing was blocked by the curved axe, screeching as Euron nearly wrenched the blade in two. "Dear brother didn't teach ya well." "Oh, right, Theon. Your daddy tossed you aside like a rotting carcass." The Ain snarled, charging hard, only for a parry to knock his sword back and a punch to stagger him, breaking his nose. He pitched back just as Euron nearly leapt on Yara, full fury unleashed. Totally paralyzed, Theon watched as Euron grabbed his sister by the head and drew her up, laughing. His uncle lifted Yara's chin up. "Theon, I want you to see this." Not a second later, Euron's jagged blade lifted up to draw across Yara's throat. Skin absolutely ripped open, blood flowed out continuously. The Greyjoy girl was helpless, trying to hold her neck wound closed, gurgling as her mouth filled with crimson. Thane couldn't speak, couldn't move. Euron Belly laughed as his niece died in his arms. Next, he tossed her lifeless body forward, crashing against the wooden deck, further flinging blood. Thane caught a brisk mist of his sister's plasma across his face. Her form came to rest below his feet, dead eyes, looking up at him. "Oh, little Theon," Euron grinned, surging forward. "You're weak. Now come on, fight me and die like a man." The presence of immediate danger allowed Theon's body to move. Before Euron got close, he ran and leaped off the side of the boat. Euron spat in his direction. "Fucking coward." Grabbing one of his tongueless reavers, he pointed to the shore. "Get word to all the forces on land. My useless nephew has to wash ashore sometime. Find him or you're meat for the sharks." A quick nod and the man was gone, cracking his neck. Euron raised his hands. "Anyone else want to fucking come at me? Huh? Anyone?" There was silence. "All dead, my lord," came one of his tunged underlings, except for the 2 Dornish sluts. A grin spread upon the Ironborn's face. "Bring him to me." Such was done rather quickly. The frazzled and trembling Illyria and Tywin tossed before him. Stepping aside, Euron laughed as they recoiled in horror at Oberyn and Nymeria's bodies, enjoying the sight. "Fuck you," Tywin shrieked. With your pretty skin, I'd prefer to do that to you." Tywin suddenly erupted, surprising enough to butt her head into Euron's stomach before the guards dragged her down. Illyria screaming as the fists flew, coughing, hacking up his stomach almost. Euron began to laugh once he regained his composure. "Feisty, the will to lead. I like that." He grinned like a hyena. "I'm gonna have fun with you." Blood dripping from her daughter's many cuts. Illyria stared daggers at Euron. "The Dornish army is still out there. My niece Arianne is still out there. They'll fucking kill you. Don't intend to be around for them to do." Kneeling right in front of her pretty face, he moved to caress it. "Cersei wants you alive. Avenge the death of her brat herself." I'll say you killed yourself, without letting her say another word." Euron plunged his clawed fingers into her throat, ripping out the windpipe with a single grip and yank. "Mother," Tywin screamed, only for another fist to land in her face. Blood all over his hands, Euron laughed. "They pay the iron price. Cheers from his men cackled over the thousand fires burning in the distance.